Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host for today, John Dehlin. It is February 22nd, 2023, and we have a breaking news story. The Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and Ensign Peak, which we will be discussing, have, agreed to some sort of settlement with the U.S. government, with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Ensign Peak is going to pay $4 million, and the Mormon Church is going to be paying $1 million, so a $5 million settlement where the Mormon Church sort of acknowledges and has even apologized, it seems, in a very weak way for, some call it fraud, some call it deception, but basically for trying to hide and mask its amount of stock investments through Ensign Peak in sort of its massive holdings of now what looks like to be hundreds of billions of dollars in stocks and cash and real estate and assets, etc. And you know, we've been talking in the past about the whistleblower David Nielsen, who used to work for Ensign Peak, and his role in bringing to light these infractions by Ensign Peak. We've talked about that in the past. But we've never really done is a thorough discussion of all of these issues. And now we've got this breaking news where the Mormon Church has admitted, in effect, wrongdoing, has been fined and has paid the fine. And so with us today, who is probably the top expert in the world that we could have to discuss this, not just because of his day job, but because he actually has a direct and maybe even I'd say personal relationship with Ensign Peak whistleblower David Nielsen. We have back on Mormon Stories Podcast attorney Mark Pugsley. Hey, Mark.
Hey, John.
Welcome back to Mormon Stories.
Thanks. It's gotten a lot more technical since I did it last time.
Well, we're trying to up our game every day. So I've known Mark for many, many years. He's been on Mormon Stories Podcast before. We'll have Maven make sure to include in the show notes our past episode or episodes with Mark. We've definitely talked about Ponzi schemes and just the prevalence of fraud in Utah. That's kind of my understanding of Mark's expertise in wheelhouse. I recently was listening to an amazing podcast, I think by the Wall Street Journal, about Nikola, which is this fraud that happened in Utah about a electric battery powered truck company that was led by a Mormon that ended up $1 billion Ponzi scheme. And who shows up in the podcast speaking about it? None other than Mark Pugsley. So Mark, you get around, but I'll let you introduce yourself if you'd like.
Okay, sure. Happy to be back, John. And I'm happy to share some of my thoughts on this. I am a lawyer in Salt Lake City. I've been practicing law for 29 years now. In fact, I think, John, you and I are almost exactly the same age. I think we were like a week apart, if I recall.
I'm August 20th, 1969.
And I'm 69?
Yeah.
Oh, you're much younger. So yeah, I'm August 18th, but I'm 66. So we're almost.
You're my brother's age.
Okay, all right.
You're my brother Joel's age. Yeah.
So I'm much your senior. Anyway, I started out, I went to law school back east at Duke University, graduated in 1994 and spent 4 years in Los Angeles at a multinational law firm practicing securities law. And then I moved back here to Salt Lake in 1998, I believe, and joined the law firm of Ray Quinney and Nebeker, which is one of the largest firms in the state. I worked at Ray Quinney for 24 years. Hopefully these are all adding up. And so I was there for a long, long time as an associate, and then as a partner for a long time, head of the securities section in the firm. And then last year, 2022 in January, I left that firm and started my own law firm. And the law firm is called Pugsley Wood LLP, and we have offices in Utah, or Salt Lake City, and Boston. So we're basically a national law firm, but we're very, very specialized. And the specialty that we do is SEC whistleblower cases. So we're one of only, I think, basically 2 law firms in the whole country, if not the whole world, that specialize in just doing this very small niche practice, which is helping people file whistleblower cases with the SEC. So that's what I've been doing since about 2010, which is when the SEC whistleblower program started. So I decided back then, just as kind of a little background, the stuff that we talked about on our last podcast was about Ponzi schemes and also about kind of the prevalence of Ponzi schemes. And I've given lots of talks and speeches and podcasts on this issue and talk about it quite a bit to try to help people understand how to avoid getting caught up in an investment scam and in a Ponzi scheme, which are very common in Utah for a whole bunch of reasons. And that's part of what we talked about last time. And I can talk about it more, but that's not really what we're doing today. So the point I was going to make is that the reason I started filing these whistleblower cases is that because we have so many in Utah, I was getting calls, and I was getting calls from victims who were caught up in a Ponzi scheme. In many cases, they couldn't get their money out. They were trying to figure out why the guy who they'd given, $100,000 to wasn't returning their phone calls. And so they would call me up and they would tell me the story and the investment that they were in. And it was usually some guy in their ward, almost always someone who had a church affiliation with. And so when the SEC set up its whistleblower program, I started filing those cases with the SEC to say, hey, look, there's something improper going on here. This is something you guys ought to look into. And so I just started filing them quite a bit. And it turned out I was filing them more than most people, I guess. I guess that's both a good and a bad thing. But over time, that just became more and more of my practice. And so I decided in 2022 to join up with my now law partner, Brian Wood, who's in Boston, to form this new firm that just is a very specialized boutique firm doing SEC whistleblower cases. And so we have filed some pretty significant cases. You mentioned Nikola, and I should just correct John that you said Nikola was a Ponzi scheme, and it's not.
Right.
It's just a company that started to create trucks, these trucks that carry freight and make electric ones, and it was created by a guy named Trevor Milton. We filed that case a few years ago. And the story is on the Bad Bets podcast that was produced by the Wall Street Journal. And we're hopefully going to make a movie about it one of these days. So they're working on that now. So it's kind of a fun case that I did, but I've done some other cases just that people may have heard of. One of them involved Washakie Renewable Energy. That was
those are the Kingstons, right?
The Kingston clan had a fuel processing plant up in Northern Salt Lake. So the whistleblowers in that case hired me to help them run that through the whole process. And then I've another case that people will have heard of involved a company called Vivint Smart Home.
Yeah.
I filed a whistleblower case with multiple agencies a few years ago that resulted in FTC fines of $20 million against Vivint for improper sales practices. And the Department of Justice also fined them, I think, $3.2 million. So basically, I help people file these cases. And then in many cases, they get an award. And so then I get paid through the award that's paid by the government agency. That's basically my practice now. So it's a very unusual practice, a very narrow niche practice. But unfortunately, in Utah, we have a lot of problems here with this. And so I end up getting calls, and we're always interested in taking on cases involving especially big public companies or Ponzi schemes, because those are the kind of cases that we like most. Oh, there's another one people may have heard of that was just written up in the Washington Post out of Las Vegas. Involved a company called J&J, also a Ponzi scheme that was being run by some folks in Las Vegas that was also primarily targeted towards members of the LDS Church. I think it's about a $400 million Ponzi scheme, and it resulted in some crazy stuff with the FBI. So people can look that up as well.
Okay, cool. Well, that's a great intro. Super excited to have you here. Really grateful. And I think, we'll get into this, but I think in addition to all your massive experience, I know that when David Nielsen was first trying to figure out what to do, you and I, I guess I found out that in some ways you had some communication with David. So I don't think there's anybody else that would be able to talk, whenever David's ready, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
But no one else would be able to even know David's situation like you would.
I can talk somewhat about it. I've talked with David. He knows I'm coming on today, and I will say that I'm going to not talk about his personal story because that's really his story to tell.
Yeah.
He is a very good friend. He and his wife, we do things socially, and we hang out quite a bit. They live in our neighborhood, so we see them all the time, and he's one of my favorite people. Also, I should say that for anyone who doubts David Nilsson and who he is, let me just say he's one of the smartest and most ethical, most honest people I've ever met. I mean, he is as honest as it comes, and that's why he's a whistleblower. All of our clients come to us because they see something inappropriate or illegal going on, and they can't do it. They don't want to participate in that. That's why they become whistleblowers. So David, that's exactly what happened. He was working for the church. He was working for Ensign Peak for years, making very good money. And he just felt like something was wrong about what he was hearing in conversations that are detailed both in the filing that is in that has come out in the press, but also another place to look is the affidavit that he filed in support of the my friend James Huntsman's lawsuit in California. David submitted an affidavit in support of that case that really gets into some great detail about conversations he had and why he just couldn't do it anymore. And he's a great guy, and I'm looking forward to the time when he's able to tell his story when his legal counsel lets him speak up.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, I do want to thank everyone who's joining us on the live stream. This is a super popular topic. We just received a super chat. Thanks for those who do donate through YouTube. That goes to help keep the lights on the Mormon Stories podcast. Rock It Out with Kim D. Hey, said, thank you for providing this information. Anyone who wants to send us a super chat, we're going to appreciate it. Also, we want to request that everybody who's joining us either on Facebook or YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. Please follow us. That helps with the algorithms, and it helps spread the word so that this episode gets seen by as many people. Also, if any of you want to post today's episode on social media, and we'd love to get as big of a live audience as we can. But thanks for subscribing, and thanks for the support. Okay, so Mark, where should we begin today? We've got an outline, but where should we begin? We've covered your background. So what's next?
Well, I mean, I guess I can talk about how I first met David, and I'll tell it from my perspective.
I'll say I met David once. I was
Okay.
at a cross-country meet with my daughter Clara, who was running for Olympus High at the time.
Oh, really?
And David walks up to me.
No
He
way.
was working for Inside Peak at the time. And he just said, hey, hey, John, I appreciate your podcast. And
that's awesome.
so, hi, David. We've met, and I also think you're super cool and courageous. So kudos to you.
all whistleblowers are courageous. And the thing that I just want to say, first of all, before I talk about this story, is that being a whistleblower is hard as hell. It is very slow. It's very frustrating. The rewards can be significant, but it's not easy. And there are implications that consequences that all of my whistleblowers suffer. But the good news is that the SEC whistleblower program in particular and the IRS program are pretty good about protecting confidentiality. David, in this case, has he was kind of outed. And the Washington Post, published a story about this without his consent and without his cooperation. And so that's complicated his life in ways that most whistleblowers don't have to deal with. And it's really unfortunate.
So that initial disclosure was not good for David.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of our clients want to stay anonymous. They don't want to be out there.
Yeah.
And if this is a small town, John, the story you just told is a good example, right? You and I both know tons of people. We know the Parkinsons. We have lots of friends in common. Well, it's a small, they say small lake city. Everybody kind of knows each other. Well, it's not good in the investment world to be outed like this, especially as someone who's blew the whistle on your former employer, the LDS Church. It's because it's going to make it hard for him to other investment funds aren't going to be that interested in hiring a guy like that for a whole bunch of different reasons that you can imagine. So it's not great.
I was just contacted today, and I'm going to keep this confidential, but I was contacted today by someone who knows someone who works in a securities related field that does business with the LDS Church. And that person was literally told, if you run up on any type of infraction related to the Mormon Church, either ignore it or give it to a superior, but better to ignore and forget it, because of the fear of what the church could do if you in any way reported them.
Yes.
So that's just one example of the
most
power
of the funds
of the
in
reach.
town that are the big funds, they manage church's money, the church's money. They don't just, it doesn't all being managed by Ensign Peak. It's also being managed by outside managers that they farm it out. And so these folks are all, beholden in a big way. I mean, it's huge chunks of money, and the church uses that power very carefully.
I even learned that there are a lot of law firms that I heard once that the church literally does business with every possible law firm in the valley that it can, so that as many law firms as possible will not be able to sort of meet the conflict of interest kind of, or just so that firms won't want to ever oppose the church. I don't even know if there's something to that, but
well, there's a reason I'm not Dave Nielsen's lawyer. How about that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I won't go into that, but it was, I would love to have represented him in this case. It's a fantastic case. So, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So love to Dave Nielsen and respect to him
and his counsel. He's got good counsel, Michael Sullivan in Georgia. And they have been working very carefully. We all belong to an organization called Taxpayers Against Fraud, which is the whistleblowing bar for the country. And I talked to them, and they're great folks. But so I can just tell you quickly that a few years ago, I was contacted by. I got a phone message. I was actually out of town. I was in Alaska with my dad, about to head into Denali National Park, and I saw a message pop up on my voicemail, and it was a guy named Dave who wanted to chat with me. He was in a difficult situation. He had just resigned from Ensign Peak and wondered if I could chat. And I don't, when I'm out of town, I don't usually take those kind of calls, but I immediately saw the significance of who he was and where he worked, because I'm very well aware of Ensign Peak, because I work in the finance industry and represent investment advisors, or used to. So I called him back immediately and chatted, and he happened to be neighbors with another guy that I worked with, and had been talking to him and saying, there's some challenges and I need some help. And this partner of mine, law partner of mine, his wife suggested, well, you should call Mark Pugsley. He's just a few blocks away. And she knew that I had left the church, which I did some years ago, and thought I would be a safe person for him to chat with. But, the point is, the thing about that is that, folks like this aren't looking to make money. They're not looking to benefit and profit from this. He was just looking for some protection and safety, because he was, under threats, and under not physical threats, but legal threats by Ensign Peak. They don't want people going around and talking about these secrets. I mean, if there's one thing we can learn from all this, is the church bent over backwards in every which way to keep this information out of the public eye. And so when they have someone like Dave leave, I'm sure they were freaking out internally, trying to keep him from talking. And so he needed help. And so I chatted with him, and then we met later. And I can't talk about our communications because they're arguably privileged, even though he's not my client. He was consulting with me in a legal way, but after, it was let's just say it's a good coincidence that I happened to do a lot of whistleblower law, because that was something that he then began to explore. So that, and the better part of it, though, is that Dave and I have gotten to be great friends, and we hang out. He renovated a home in our neighborhood, and it's just fabulous. He's a very talented guy, and so we play pool and I beat him most of the time, although it depends on the night. So it's great. He's a really good guy.
Is his wife a great real estate agent?
Yeah.
Okay. I just heard that.
Yeah, she is.
Okay. All right. So yeah, what's next in the story?
Well, I mean, he found counsel ultimately and decided to file. When we're contacted in these cases, a lot of times people have information, but they don't really know what to do with it. And I suspect that that's kind of what was going on here. And so it's a very lengthy process that you go through with counsel in general to identify what are the agencies that would be interested in this information that you have, right? Whistleblowers come to us all the time with stuff, and we say, well, that's something the EPA might be interested in, or the Department of Labor might be interested in, or the FTC would be interested in. But unfortunately, those agencies don't have whistleblower programs. So whistleblower programs are fantastic because not only do they pay awards to successful whistleblowers, but they also give you protection, anti-retaliation protections, very, very valuable. So if you become a whistleblower, you have some laws that come into place that prevent the company from coming after you. And then also they pay awards. And is it okay if I just explain a little bit about how that works? So the SEC program is the one I'm most familiar with. I also have cases pending in a number of others. CFTC has a program for commodities. IRS has a whistleblower program. They're all a little different, but the SEC program in particular is a fantastic program. I believe they've paid out since the inception of the program. I might get these numbers wrong, but it's about $1.7 billion in awards. I mean, it's a huge amount of money. And so but by paying those awards, they've attracted tips, massive tips that have led to huge fines and penalties that they collect. It's much greater than the number of awards they pay. So they're basically incentivizing people with information about fraud to come forward and blow the whistle. And so what happens is when people come to us, we talk to them generally about what's going on, what the situation is, what the information is, and then we figure out if there's a whistleblower program that would be applicable. And the reason for that is that that's how I get paid. I mean, I don't want to sound, crass about it, but we love to help people file cases in agencies that don't pay awards. But if we did that all day, we would go bankrupt. So we mostly work with the SEC, CFTC, and IRS programs. I'll also say that these things take a long time. Some cases take 3 to 4 or 5 years. IRS cases can take up to 10 years to go. So it's a long, difficult process. You file the claim. If they think it's valuable, they'll act on it. The SEC in 2022 received over 12,000 tips. So you can break that down. It's several hundred a week. And it's a tough process to get noticed and picked up and to have them take your case and file it. So we spend a lot of time screening cases and try to find good cases that we want to file, and some we don't. In fact, most we don't take. So what David did and what other whistleblowers did is they work with their lawyers to put together the claim, put together the information, file it, and then they wait for the regulators to contact them. If the regulators collect fines and penalties, then they will pay you a percentage of what they collect. So if hypothetically the SEC collects $100 million, then they would pay a whistleblower award of between 10 and 30% of what they collect. By the way, not how much the fine is, but they have to actually get the money. So if people go bankrupt, it's not good. So you can do the math. $100 million case could potentially be a $30 million award. So very significant. Our firm just announced a $28 million payment to one of our clients. So we have cases, but those are cases that have been going on for a long time, and that's kind of how we do it.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's a good background of the whistleblower sort of provisions.
Yeah. And so David, presumably did that, and he filed that with both the IRS and the SEC.
Should we talk about maybe a little bit of history of Ensign Peak, what it is and why it was created, when it was created, who created it, to the extent I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but just vaguely, generally speaking.
Yeah, I will say that,
and why the church would create an Ensign Peak even to begin with.
So this will come into play, and this is not, most people in your audience probably are very well aware of the fact that the church has massive amounts of money. Where did they get that money? Well, there was a time when the church struggled, and they, basically told everyone to pay tithing. They started making it a bigger deal. Historically speaking, I'm not a historian, but most people know that. And then as the church grew and the membership grew and the wealth of its members grew, its tithing revenues grew. And eventually, and I don't know the whole history of it, but eventually the tithing revenues, and I'll call them revenues because I always thought the church is more of a corporation than a church, but the money that comes in from tithing was greater than what their operational costs were. And so they had a surplus. So they began to invest that surplus. And at some point, and I think it's I don't know exactly when it was formed. Do you know offhand? It was,
I want to say in the 90s, and I want to say
somewhere in the 90s.
I want to say he was presiding at the time.
1997, it created it as an integrated auxiliary of the church to manage the church's investments. So at some point, they filed this they created this entity to almost act like an in-house investment advisor. Investment advisors are kind of like stockbrokers. They manage the money. And then they recruited people who had a background in the financial industry to come run it, who are also active LDS people. They all had to be active LDS and have temple recommends. I mean, they're church employees basically. But they recruited, and they pay them pretty well. I mean, my understanding is that the Ensign Peak people get paid much more than a typical church employee, and they have to do that because they have to recruit people from Wall Street who are making gobs of money already. And if you want to get the right people, you have to pay them.
But like with tech, probably not as much as you'd make at Apple or Microsoft.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe not
slightly below, but enough to, I mean, you can't pay them 80 grand and expect someone to leave Wall Street unless they have a really strong testimony.
Okay.
But you're not going to get the best and the brightest that way. And so, they recruited people, and they have a number of people working there. And they're, from what I understand, a few of them have had regulatory problems in the past, and maybe that's why they left industry. At one point I did a search on a broker check website. It's the website run by FINRA to monitor who has licenses and who doesn't. And you'll find that the majority of the people that work in Ensign Peak may have been licensed in the past, but are not currently licensed. And that to me is really interesting because, church, I think, has bent over backwards to try to keep everything that Ensign Peak does under wraps. They don't even announce the existence of the entity, was not even known for years. So they don't want their folks to be licensed because that gives FINRA and the SEC the right to come in and do exams and other things like that. So licensure for an entity like this is real problematic. And so they've not done that.
Okay.
Which ought to be a red flag. Can I just say another thing, John, for those in your audience who might understand the financial services industry or really any big industry? There's a role in most companies called compliance. And a compliance officer is someone who makes sure that everybody follows the rules. Well, one of the things that you will see in David's 90-page filing with the finance committee and in his other filings is that until I think it was like 2005, Ensign Peak did not have any compliance officers, zero, none. And it was managing one of the largest portfolios in the world. And it had nobody internally to make sure they followed the rules. When eventually, with David's urging, they hired someone, they hired one person. And for a portfolio of this size, this is massive. $100 billion is massive. And they should have had a whole team of people making sure that all the rules were being followed, and that maybe would have prevented the exact problem that they're facing now.
Or not, because as we're going to see, people tried to raise the red flag and looks like they were overwritten. Right.
Yeah. And as is true, if anyone has worked in the church, they know that the first presidency has a lot of control over pretty much everything the church does, and Ensign Peak's no exception. They couldn't do anything without the First Presidency's approval, and you'll see that comes up over and over in the SEC settlement document.
Yeah. Okay, so Ensign Peak was created to manage the church's investments, surplus, and investments and assets.
Yeah.
And I guess one thing maybe it's important to mention is that it's not just stock, from what I understand.
Well, the Ensign Peak doesn't manage the real estate. I mean, that's a whole nother 100 billion or however much that's worth. Nobody really knows.
Okay.
But it isn't just stock. It's going to be a lot of other types of investments that are managed through other people. They've got lots of foreign companies that they invest in, lots of foreign accounts. So this Ensign Peak mostly just focuses on different types of investments that are not physical.
I just remember some of the spreadsheets that came out with the initial leak around David's case mentions cash, mentioned municipal bonds,
Sure.
mentioned real estate,
right.
All those
tradable
things.
securities for the most part, some private investments. I'm sure they invest in a lot of private companies, but not the $100 billion number, and whatever, we don't know what that number is today, does not include all the malls and the temples and all the real estate that the church owns worldwide.
Okay.
Florida, half of Florida.
No, I think literally it's like
I know
2 to 4% of the public
like
land.
They're the largest private landholder in the state of Florida, like by a long shot.
Yeah.
So,
okay, so Ensign Peak is created, and I guess, do we want to talk about once the funds got too big, how they started trying to hide, and avoid reporting and hide? Is this the time to maybe talk about kind of I know Tony Semirod's article in the Salt Lake Tribune kind of lays that out pretty nicely, or do we want to go to a different place first?
Well, that's fine. The order, the SEC's order, let me just say that before I really started this firm, I did a lot of SEC enforcement work. So I defended people that were sued by the SEC in some cases. It was not my whole practice. It was a piece of my practice. And so I've negotiated orders like the SEC order that was issued. It just came out yesterday. And this is very unusual. This one is unusual on a lot of different ways. And we can talk about kind of, how much the fine was, but this has a lot of detail in it that I'm not used to seeing in an SEC order. And so
should we cover that?
This is kind of unusual, and it does go into that history.
Okay.
It might be a good way to kind of walk through it because it kind of says what happened, like, well, how did this happen? And and can I say one other caveat, John, that's really important. First of all, if people are wondering the document we're talking about, if you Google SEC settlement with LDS Church, you just Google that, you will find the press release that was issued by the SEC. That is not what we're talking about here. If you look at that page, and those who are on computers now can look at that press release in kind of small type on the right-hand side, there's a little blue link that says SEC order. That's the document you want to look at. It's almost kind of hidden on the SEC's website, but you have to look at the order because that's where the rubber meets the road. And this is a document. This is an nine page.
And I just included it. I just pasted it to the comments for the live stream, and we'll make sure Maven includes it in the show notes as well.
This is really the critical document. And I want, because I've negotiated these, I want people to understand something very important. This is not written just by the SEC. This is a document that was a negotiated document with the church's lawyers and the SEC's lawyers together. Paul Feint, a friend of mine, works in the SEC office. He handled this case for the SEC here in Salt Lake. He's a good lawyer, and he negotiated this. I know he's very careful, but if you look at the very first page of that order in section 2, it says respondents, which is the LDS Church and Ensign Peak, respondents consent to the entry of this order instituting cease and desist proceedings pursuant to section 21C. So this is not something that they just made up out of whole cloth. The church saw this and admitted it. And in the offer of settlement that you don't have access to, they don't publish those. In the offer of settlement that the church made, part of the language in there is that they cannot publish a press release that disputes this order. Cannot do it. And I have issue personally with the press release that the church issued, because I think it does in some ways dispute the findings in this order. It seems to me that that is a highly disingenuous press release, self-serving. You characterize it as a semi-apology. I mean, I guess in the context of church apologies, it might be great.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's the worst apology you'll ever see. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they've kind of pushed back on some of these really important findings that they agreed to.
Mhm.
This 9-page document is a document the church saw and agreed to before it was issued.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. That's great context.
Yeah.
And our viewers will definitely be checking it out, and listeners too.
So I wanted to highlight some pieces of this. John, I don't want to be too boring here.
No. Let's do it.
This is lawyer stuff. And
Mormon Stories is long form, and we like substance.
All right.
So let's do substance.
So if people in the comments think if you're bored and you want me to move on, we can move on, but there's some really critical, you can see my writing all over this document. I mean, there's some really critical pieces of information in this order.
Yeah.
And the main thing I want to point out is,
and I mean, let's not skip over the things that'll help tell the story.
Sure.
So,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the summary is really good, and just kind of gives the summary that from 1997 to 2019, Ensign Peak, an entity which manages the assets, including the investment securities of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, failed to file certain forms. Okay. That's kind of boring, right? What's the form 13F? Who cares if the church files 13F? 13F forms are important because it gives, and they only, by the way, 13F forms, not everybody has to file these. Only people with massive portfolios of $100 million or more have to file forms 13F. But 13F tells the market and tells market participants what the church has, or what that company has in their investment portfolio. And the SEC and Congress years ago, I think it's in the 34 Act, they made this determination that if you hold tons of securities, tons of investments, if you're a big player, you have to tell people what you have. SEC is big on transparency. They're big on disclosure. And that's why in the securities world, disclosure is the name of the game. So they say, look, guys, most of you don't have to worry about this, but if you're a big shot, if you're a big player, you got to file this 13F, because you got to tell market players what you're doing and what you hold. It doesn't tell you all the trades, but it tells you what's every quarter you have to file those.
And that's important for the market and the rule of law. Why?
Well, because
for capitalism,
there's tons of people that want to know what these big funds are doing. Many of them follow them. Goldman Sachs has whole funds that follow other funds that, manage assets in a certain way. Berkshire Hathaway is one of the biggest groups, and a lot of people want to know what's Berkshire Hathaway doing, because they're known, to be very savvy investors. There's other hedge funds and investment funds in New York that are known to be very savvy. So people want to see what their holdings are, so they can say, oh, they have a conflict or whatever. And, by the way, those disclosures would have been helpful for church members, because you could have seen, does the church invest in tobacco stocks, beer, alcohol stocks? Do they invest in things that they claim not to do? Well, these disclosures would have shown that, and it would have given a level of transparency.
Also, do I need to pay tithing? Does the church need my money?
Well,
right?
We'll get to that. But yeah. I mean, and what exactly is this rainy day fund? And what, is the second, this just drives me crazy that it's a rainy day fund, but we can talk about that later. I'm just like, okay.
And by the way, Bernie Madoff filed fraudulent forms, right?
Right. I mean, that was one of his issues. Mostly he gave investment
13F forms.
Yes. But he also gave investment returns to people that were fake, right? So they would get like a statement, here's what's happened in your portfolio, look at how great it's doing, and he faked all those. Yeah. The Ensign Peak they only have one client, they only have one customer, so they didn't really have to worry about that. But for obvious reasons, they did not want to file these forms, because once their portfolio reached the threshold of above $100 million, which is probably before Ensign Peak was even made, right? I mean, the day they were made, they probably had several $billion. We don't know, but it was a big fund from day one, right? And so, and I'm sure at some point someone said, yeah, we got to file these forms. What are we going to do? And then it went up to the first presidency, and the first presidency, for whatever obvious reason, didn't want them to be filed. Why? Well, it's obvious. It's obvious, because if people knew how much the church had, they would not pay tithing, period. I mean, I don't think that's rocket science. I think it would have been relevant to me when I was a tithe payer, but whatever.
Okay. And you may have already answered this, so please forgive me. Why not just have an office of investments within the corporation of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and manage them all there? You probably already answered this. Please forgive me. Why create an entirely new LLC or 501c3 or whatever?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I assume it's because there's all these regulatory requirements that if you're in the investment industry, it's the most highly regulated industry in the country by many standards. So there's all these things you have to do to comply with securities laws. So they probably felt like it would be better to have these guys all on their own. I think it may also have been the fact that they weren't, they wanted to carve out their salaries, so they weren't kind of part of the normal salary structure within the church office building. That may have been part of it too.
So people wouldn't have known what these dudes are getting paid.
They didn't want to know how much they're paying these guys from New York.
HR, yeah.
That's purely speculation. But they had their own office. There was no sign, from what I understand. It wasn't like they were in an office building with Ensign Peak on the marquee. No, it was kind of tucked in the church office building.
I mean, one of the things I remember from the report I read years ago was that like Packer didn't even know how much was in Ensign Peak. So like, maybe you already said this, but maybe it was a way to make sure, kind of like cells in Al Qaeda, the left hand won't know what the right hand's doing.
And if you may recall that the church used to give like an auditor's report periodically at conference, and then they stopped doing that, and they basically said, we're self-auditing now. My understanding is that one of the reasons they moved away from public, Ernst & Young, I think, was their public auditor for many years, is that they were concerned about this portfolio. They didn't want the auditors who are part of a big company, a big independent auditing company, to disclose or have access to the size of the portfolio and probably other assets that the church owns too. Yeah. So that could have been part of it. There's all sorts of reasons why it makes sense to do this. But I'm purely speculating at this point.
That's good. All right. So
anyway,
the church didn't file the 13F. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 13Fs, and at some point
for over a decade.
Yeah, and no more than that.
22 years.
22 years.
22 years didn't file the forms they should for.
And at some point, as we get into this, you'll see that they said, someone told them, and I think at multiple times people said, "Hey, wait a minute, you're supposed to be filing these forms." And then what happened? Instead of Ensign Peak acting independently like most investment firms, these guys, everything that they do has to be okayed by the first presidency. That's really important. Then my understanding is that nobody even knew the size of this portfolio outside of the first presidency, meaning even the Quorum of the 12. Going back to your point about Packer, he was asked and he didn't even know. So it was really only the first presidency that knew how much money the church has.
Yeah. And
that, in my mind, qualifies as a tightly held secret. I mean, holy cow. You don't even tell your own the Quorum of the 12, but that's how secret this was. And so, but the people at Ensign Peak obviously knew. And so they wanted to make sure that this secret didn't get out. And so at some point, someone said, "Hey, guys, you got to be filing these things." And instead of becoming compliant, what did they do? And the press release says they consulted with counsel. And I don't know anything about that. I don't know what counsel was given.
That's the church saying, "Hey, we just did what the lawyers told us to do," right?
Basically. But I do know this, whoever their counsel was, whatever their counsel told them, I don't know. But what I do know is that the counsel would not have told them to form shell companies that were totally fake. I mean, that's not what counsel would have done. If you're gonna start moving these assets into independent companies that fell below the threshold of disclosure, okay, fine. But you got to actually have them be independent companies, and that's where I'll bet you $100 they didn't follow their legal counsel's advice.
Yeah,
they instead of, they wanted to control it. It was all about control. And
but another way to say that is this came from the first president. This likely came from the first presidency.
No, we know it did,
down.
John. We know it did.
Yeah.
And this is really a really important part that I want to read to you on page 2 of this document. And this is a sentence that is really important. And it's important because sometimes lawyers, we use this thing like we define a term and then we don't really go back and say what that defined term means, right? And then we would call this OSF or something throughout a document, and people would say, oh, what's OSF again? Oh, you look at the beginning of the document and say, what does OSF stand for? Okay, Open Stories Foundation, right? We use acronyms and so we don't have to write out the whole thing every time. Now,
do we want to finish the summary, because it talks about the 13 LLCs?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we'll read that and then we'll get to the next paragraph, because the next paragraph is what I'm talking about. My apologies. I feel like people are getting bored.
No. We've got 1,400 people joining us,
wow.
and they're saying not boring at all.
Okay.
So
hi everyone.
Let's
shut me down if you.
No.
Okay.
Let's light it up.
Okay. So Ensign Peak. This is the second paragraph of the summary. Ensign Peak develops its approach to filing Forms 13F in the names of LLCs with the knowledge and approval of the church. Very important. Ensign Peak didn't do jack without talking to the church. The church holds the purse strings here. It's the church's money, and they made the call at every turn. Not just the church, not just some random functionary in the church, the first presidency.
Yeah.
And I'll explain that, how we know that in a minute.
And this would have been Gordon B. Hinckley. This would have been Thomas S. Monson. This would have been Henry B. Eyring.
Yeah.
This would have been Uchtdorf.
Oh, yeah.
And this would have been, and this includes Russell M. Nelson, Dallin H. Oaks, and again, Henry B. Eyring, right?
So speaking of Uchtdorf, little side note, you know how that was a big deal when someone came out of the first
when he was demoted out of the first presidency.
Yeah, that hardly ever happens.
Yeah.
I have my suspicion is the reason that never happens is because those 3 people in the first presidency have this critical knowledge of the assets of Ensign Peak. And so they want to keep that in the family amongst just the first presidency. So by demoting Uchtdorf, they created a potential for that to get out. That's my theory. I don't know if it's true, but maybe why the turnover in the first presidency is so rare.
Okay.
Anyway, who knows? So there is a quick thing. There's a comment. I think it's in David filed this affidavit for James Huntsman's case. He filed an affidavit to assist them with a motion to dismiss. That affidavit, I hope maybe you can track that down. I didn't think to send it to you, but it contains a lot of very interesting details. One of the details, if my memory serves me right, is that he was present during a meeting with the leaders of Ensign Peak and the other people from the church who were trying to figure out what the heck are we going to do with these 13Fs. And people were saying, why don't we just disclose it? And that there was a specific discussion that we cannot disclose it for a reason. What was the reason? What was the reason that the church made a decision not to disclose how big the portfolio was? Because people would stop paying tithing. That was the discussion. So if there's any doubt out there, if the church tries to claim, oh, it was an oversight, whatever, bullshit, excuse me, that is not true. The church knew darn well that disclosure of this information would cause people to stop paying their tithing. And, if the church disclosed it, which of course they don't, my suspicion is that there has been a steep drop in tithing revenues since the day that report hit the Washington Post several years ago. I'm confident of it. Yeah. I'm confident. And even Jenna Reese, who's the writer, Jenna Reese, even she said that caused her, an active person who writes, it caused her to redirect her tithing to other charitable sources. If there are people that are listening today that are still paying tithing to the church, please don't pay it to the church. They just don't need your money. The fears that Ensign Peak had about this disclosure were entirely justified. They don't need your money. There are other charities around, even Mormon-based charities, that are far more deserving. And guess what? Most charities will give you an accounting of how your money was used. And I'm a big fan of accountability and disclosure. And I think everyone should only give their charitable dollars to entities that will tell them how they spent it. And I can tell you one entity that doesn't do that, and that's the LDS Church. I don't care how big their portfolio is. That's a failure on the church's part. They should tell people what they're doing with their money. And by the way,
I have to with Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation.
You have to.
Every year
You're
I publish at $9.90,
are, right?
where I publish my basic budget, right?
If you
including my own salary.
Maybe you should switch OSF to a church, and
Exactly.
then you would not have to make those disclosures.
By the way, I just found the James Huntsman affidavit. I have it up, and I shared it in the chat comments. Is there anything, did you describe it adequately, or is there anything?
Yeah. I mean, it's very long and very detailed, but there's some really interesting conversations that happened that are described in that affidavit, if you haven't read it, about why the decision was made to hide this stuff from church members. And it's obvious. I mean, it's not rocket science.
It was to hide, it was to not de-incent people to pay tithing.
Well, and the other problem is, John, that they were making money on the tithing. The reason Ensign Peak has 100 billion plus right now, they didn't just make it out of thin air. You know where this money came from? The origination of this money, it's excess tithing revenue. Now, the church doesn't, to this day, according to David's submissions, I'm not getting this from anyone else, but David Nilsson's submission is that the church has a surplus of tithing year to year, and it's several $billion excess every year that they don't need. They can build temples on every other block, but they're still not going to spend all that money. They just don't need it. Plus, they have free janitorial, right? So the point is that the church has a situation where they've got all this extra money. What are you going to do with it? Well, at some point, someone made a decision that rather than spending it to, help the poor or do something like, Christ-like, what did they do? They took that same money and instead applied it to, or put it in the stock market. I just don't get that. I mean, can I just pause for 1 second? And when this came out, I had a conversation with my 80-year-old mother, who I love very much. We're very close. And she just said to me, Mark, what do you think about this $100 billion? Do you think that's true? And I said, yeah, I think it is true. She said, I just can't believe it. What a wonderful thing that the church is so careful with the management of his money, which is the response that many faithful members have. And I said, Mom, I appreciate that, but let me ask you this question. If Christ himself were here on the earth today and had $200 million or $100 million,
billion?
A billion. Sorry. 100 billion, 100 million. I don't care. Whatever it is. I mean, let's just say Christ was here. You hand him a check for $100 billion or even $1 million. I mean, Mom, what do you think he would do with that money? Would he put it in the stock market? And she, of course, she knows the answer to that question. Everybody who claims to be a Christian knows the answer to that question. There is hunger. There is starving. There are people in Syria and in Turkey who are dying right now. There are extreme needs. There's earthquakes. There's storms. There are extreme poverty throughout this world.
Pandemics.
Yeah. I mean,
Ukraine war.
Think there's food security. Many people have given estimates that I think it's like $4 billion would solve world hunger, literally solve it. I mean, honestly, what is the church doing putting this in the stock market? And another key disclosure of David's report was that in the whole time, the 20 or so years since 1997 that Ensign Peak Advisors have been in existence, not a single penny has been used to serve others or to help the poor or to feed the hungry. Yeah, the church does spend money they get through fast offerings on that, but all this billions and billions of dollars are just sitting in the stock market in Toyota and Apple stock. Why are they doing that? Why does anyone really tell me that Christ would want them to spend the money that way? It just is so baffling to me.
Yeah. And part of this David Nielsen affidavit talks about how, was it Roger Clark?
Yeah.
How there was an acknowledgement within Ensign Peak that the only two expenditures that had ever been made with Ensign Peak funds were not charitable expenditures. They were what?
The mall.
The City Creek Mall, bailing it out for overruns, a consumer mall, and
a beneficial life insurance company, which is actually, my law firm is in the office, the very floors, I believe, that Beneficial Life used to be in. Beneficial Life didn't manage its assets well and needed to be bailed out. They were insolvent, basically. They didn't have enough reserves to meet the needs, as I understand it, and so the church had to bail them out. So 400 million, I think, and $1 billion or $2 billion on the mall, the beautiful mall.
Gerardo wants me to add that the church's disclosed welfare contributions have increased over 2,000% since the Ensign Peak scandal was leaked.
Well, okay. So they have a PR problem. I get it, right?
Yeah.
But John, I don't care. It's like a fraction. And they still, for as far as we know, haven't dipped into Ensign Peak to do that.
Right.
They have tithing revenues that they can use. A lot of that, as I understand it, are fast offerings. You know, we're always told to give fast offerings on top of tithing. They get, I'm sure, billions of dollars in fast offerings. So they can do that, and they still aren't touching this money. Well, why? What are they? Anyway, I'm sorry. There's total detour, but it just drives me nuts. I mean, honestly, does anyone think that Jesus needs $200 billion during the second coming? I mean, does anyone think that there's actually going to be a monetary system during the millennium? I mean, honestly, what this is just nuts. What are we doing with this money? It could be used in so many beautiful ways. Not only that, John, can you think of a better PR strategy than to start funding hunger programs and homeless programs throughout the world, helping people recover from earthquakes, spending billions of dollars? I mean, the church wouldn't need a missionary program if they started really spending this money in a real way to solve world hunger. It would be a huge missionary program in and of itself. I just don't get it.
And not to rant, and the church is really—
I've ranted enough. I apologize.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
I'm wanting to pile on, but I'm not going to pile on. But I mean, Nelson's trying to turn the church more towards Christ.
He is.
In terms of its logo.
Nelson. David Nelson is too. Sorry,
but Russell Nelson, the logo now has Jesus in center, and you can't say Mormon anymore. You can only say the Church of Jesus Christ. So in like marketing PR ways, they're trying to trump up the Christ aspects of Mormonism. But what the church, is not doing is following Jesus's at least two admonitions. When you've done it unto the least of these, my brother, and you've done it unto me, which is the poor and the naked and the afflicted. But also, isn't there a parable about the talents and bearing the talents and hiding them versus like spend?
I haven't been to church in a while, John. So I don't remember that stuff.
Anyway, no. I mean, Christ said, use what you have now for the now, not like store it up for later. But anyway, we get back. So back to Ensign Peak.
Well, okay, back to Ensign Peak.
and the
all right, so we're still talking about the SEC order. This is the order that was issued by the actual Exchange Commission.
That the church
there's a commission in Washington, D.C. They have to see this and sign off on it, and it has been signed off. And
we haven't talked about the LLCs yet. Are we the 12 LLCs?
Well, we're going to get into that. Yeah, we're going to get into that. Okay. That was just the brief summary. Okay. And again, if we bog down, we can move quickly through it. But there's a key part in paragraph 1 on page 2 that I hope everyone will look at. Okay. This is going to be important as we walk through these paragraphs. It's the last sentence of the first full paragraph, and it is, as referenced in this order. So meaning every time in this order, they use this phrase, senior leadership of the church. Who are they talking about? This is telling you right now, consists of the church's first presidency and presiding bishopric. Okay, so maybe I guess the presiding bishopric may have known as well about the money. But anyway, they're not talking about the 12. They're not talking about some random functionary in
some quorum of the 70 presidency
or even
member.
A church employee down in the audit department. That is not what they're
Roger Clark.
No. Right. Everything, each one of these decisions, when we read senior leadership of the church, you should see that as first presidency. That's who it is, first presidency. Okay. So that's just really important. So it talks about that then, and there's 3,000 congregations across 160 countries. And then in paragraph 2, Ensign Peak is a Utah nonprofit. It's a separate entity, by the way. It's not, there's some dispute about whether it's a integral, I think it's called an ancillary part of the church itself, or whether it's independent. That has some legal specific legal importance, but suffice it to say that it manages the church's reserves. So these are all reserves. These are not operating monies, and they are reserves that were developed from extra tithing. The surplus tithing every year goes in there, and then it's added on. Can I make one other point, John?
Yeah.
And I clarified this with some reading I did this afternoon, that there is no, this is what the church does. They try to make it sound, when they gave money to the mall, remember what they said? They said none of this money came from tithing, right? When they donated, when they gave the money to build the mall. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but when you take money out of Ensign Peak, that is tithing money. It's either tithing money or it's surplus on the tithing money. So let me give you an analogy. If you and Margie have a joint bank account, right? And each of you have income and you put all your money into one account, at that point, once it's commingled in that account, it's not your money or Margie's money. It's joint, right? It's your money. And you can't say that dollar is attributable to my income and that dollar in that account is attributable to her. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah.
And so when the church says this isn't tithing money, well, that is totally disingenuous, to say it nicely, because those monies in Ensign Peaks that Ensign Peak made were based on excess tithing, and so it's interest and income based on the tithing revenues that they receive. They're all in one account. They're all commingled in there. There's David's affidavits make it clear there was no separation of the tithing money versus the interest on the tithing money. It's all one. So you can't say we didn't use tithing money to build the mall. That was tithing money or interest on the tithing money.
Yeah. That's really it's disingenuous. It's a shell game.
Yeah.
If they take tithing money and invest it and then use that money to bail out the mall, or
you
to
wouldn't
do
have
Ensign
$100 billion without
Yeah.
the excess tithing that went into that account. That's where it came from.
That's, again, are you honest in your dealings with your fellow? That's not honest.
It's like if I told my wife I just bought a car with only my money, she'd be, well, that's my money too. You can't, we both contribute to that. So it's not like you can just separate that out. Sorry. Okay.
I looked up, I just was curious, if it's a 501c3 nonprofit, Ensign Peak, there should be a 990, a public 990 that's available, but I couldn't find it.
No.
What's up with that?
I don't know. If you listened, I just listened to the interview with Sam Brunson that they did for the Peggy Fletcher Stack. The Tribune does a religion talk, I forget what they call it, podcast, and they interviewed Sam Brunson, and who's a tax law professor, and he has all sorts of opinions about this, which I don't agree with. But what he did say is that he thinks one of the most important things the church could start doing is filing the 990s. But I think churches are exempt. That's my understanding. I'm not a tax lawyer.
Even though Ensign Peak is technically not the church.
This is where that legal argument comes in, is Ensign Peak a part of the church or not? If it's separate, it should have to file those. If it's not, it wouldn't.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense.
And their point is, their argument is, no, we're just totally part of the church. We're not independent, even though they have a separate entity, they have separate management, they have their own board of directors. It seems separate to me, but for whatever reason, the SEC didn't want to go down that road.
Got it. Okay, let's keep going.
All right. So the management of Ensign Peak reports to who? This word, senior leadership of the church. They report to the first presidency. I don't know why they didn't just say first presidency, but that's who they report to.
Yeah.
And they are accountable to the first presidency for their stewardship, their fiduciary duty, and managing this money in a good way. And by the way, because I'm in the finance industry, I know that the Ensign Peak actually has a pretty good reputation. They're savvy, they're aggressive, they are careful about where they put their money, and they are good at negotiating discounted fees from their outside advisors that they use. They put a lot of money with outside advisors, and because they can write such big checks, most funds can't write checks like this. They're very good about trying to work down the fees so they're not paying too much. They're good. They're savvy people.
Would it be wrong to make a parallel to Kurt McConkie, that Ensign Peak is kind of the Kurt McConkie of Mormon investment stuff, or is that not a pleasant association?
I don't know. I know Kurt McConkie very well, and I don't think that they would appreciate that, because they do.
The Ensign Peak people would appreciate the comparison to Kurt McConkie.
But you could make that comparison if Ensign Peak took outside money, but they don't. They do have a fund. My understanding is there is a fund that the church created independently that involves where people leave money to the church in their wills. and they have all these trusts. They have a whole
the
department.
Deseret Trust Company, right?
Yes, Deseret Trust Company also has a big portfolio.
Yeah.
And Ensign Peak does manage that. My understanding also is that Ensign Peak manages the endowment for BYU. So they do have some other clients, so to speak, which to me means that they should have to register as an investment advisor, but they still take the position that those are somehow so closely related to the church that they're not, that they're still an integral part of the church. Curtin McConkie has outside clients, lots of them, and they do other work besides church work. So they're not quite as beholden. And of course, they don't have the first presidency breathing down their neck like Ensign Peak does. I mean, Ensign Peak reports to the first presidency, and I don't think the law firm does that. I'm pretty sure they don't.
Got it. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, so here in paragraph 3, we start getting into it, and I just have some parts highlighted that I think we should talk about. We don't need to read the whole thing, but the church created Ensign Peak in 1997 as an integrated auxiliary of the church. That's that language we were just talking about. That the SEC chose not to fight them on whether they're a quote unquote integrated auxiliary. If they are exempt from a lot of these filings. To manage the church's investment securities. Ensign Peak has no shareholders or members. The securities portfolio managed by Ensign Peak consists of what the church calls reserve funds or reserves, which include U.S. equity and debt securities purchased with, okay, here we go, right here. The church wrote this, the church agreed to this document.
Yeah.
Where does their money come from?
Yeah.
Right there.
Excess tithing.
Excess tithing.
Yeah.
So there's no dispute anymore. No one can ever say, oh, that has nothing to do with tithing. No, this is tithing money and interest on the tithing money and returns from the tithing money. That's all it is.
And they would have known they were saying those words, when they agreed to this document.
Yeah. Are you kidding me? These documents, they know this is a public document. We spend days negotiating these documents.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I should say, to the extent that there are revenues from like Deseret Book or, some Beneficial Life or I don't even know if they own the Deseret News anymore, but if there are revenues that are generated from those, I think those also would go into here. So there's a piece of it that's not tithing based, some fraction.
Oh, they still own Deseret News for sure.
Yeah. But is it making any money, John?
Yeah.
I would say no.
No, probably not.
Is Deseret Book making any money? Probably not. They're definitely subsidized.
Yeah.
Okay. So
excess tithing is being used.
No question. I mean, the church agreed to this order, and it says excess tithing is where it comes from. So no more disputing that. I'm going to, paragraph 4 talks about the Exchange Act and the 13F filing. We talked about that already, about why they have to file these reports. So here's 5. Here's where we get into the nitty gritty. Throughout its history, the securities portfolio Ensign Peak managed for the church contained a wide variety of equity and fixed income assets. At its inception, when it was started, inception is in 1997. At its inception, Ensign Peak managed approximately $7 billion of church assets, a significant percentage of which consisted of Section 13F securities. Let me say there's some things that don't require reporting on 13F. The church says right now it's about $37 billion that would qualify for 13F. That's a third of their total stock portfolio. A third of it is managed in other countries. They're foreign, or it's managed by outside fund managers, so they don't have to report that. But the 37 billion here, it's right here.
It's 38 billion as of 2020.
Right, as of 2020. The portion of Section 13F securities in the portfolio grew to approximately 37.8 billion in 2020. But again, that's just a third. Yeah. That doesn't represent the whole.
So we're already over 100 billion.
Yeah.
In just stocks, right?
Right. Just stocks and securities, or they could be in companies in different ways. There's all sorts of different types of investments, bonds, debt securities, treasuries, you name it. There's all that stuff.
Okay.
Throughout its history, Ensign Peak was required to file Forms 13F. So they're basically saying, this 20-year period, they had to file these forms, right?
Yeah.
Here's the crazy part. Paragraph 7, by at least 1998, senior management at Ensign Peak was aware of Ensign Peak's requirement to file Forms 13F and communicated this requirement to who? Senior leadership. Who's that? First presidency. In 1998, at least, Ensign Peak told the first presidency, we're supposed to file these forms. And I'm sure as part of that, it was like, and by the way, when we file them, you know, all hell's going to break loose because people are going to see how much money we have. So,
Gordon B. Hinckley, 10 years before he died. So that would have been Gordon B. Hinckley as president. Yeah. And I don't know who his first presidency.
They're like, hey, we're supposed to file these forms, but you know, everyone's going to see. And what does the first presidency of the church do? Well, next paragraph, their intent was to prevent disclosure. The church is more concerned about hiding the money than they are complying with the law. That is what this says. No question. To prevent disclosure of the securities portfolio managed by Ensign Peak. Why? And just as an aside, we've talked about this already. Why are they worried about disclosure? Because they're worried no one will pay tithing or people will stop paying tithing.
And just for the record, that would have been Hinckley, Monson, and either Faust or Eyring, depending on the year.
Sure.
Okay.
So they have a meeting, right? And you know, who are these Christ-like, you know, leaders who are in direct contact with Christ? Did they get revelation when they chose to violate the law? How did they make this decision? I mean, it's a good question. What did they do?
And is that accurate language to violate the law?
Absolutely.
Okay, so they broke the law. They broke the law.
They intentionally made a decision in 1997, at least 1998, excuse me. By the way, that's 1 year after the company was formed. So it was formed in 97. 98, they show up, right? They show up in Hinckley's office and say, hey, we got a problem. We're supposed to file these forms. What does Hinckley do? What was the first presidency do? Hide it. That's their reaction, not, hey, you know what? Consequences are consequences. Let's just follow the law. Let's, you know, aren't there some scriptures about, you know, following the law? And,
one of the articles of faith is we believe in honoring, obeying, and sustaining the law.
That's it. Yeah. What did they do? Did they follow that article of faith? No.
Yeah.
No, they did the opposite. They wanted to hide it. What did they do? Yeah. The first presidency directed them to hide the money.
Yeah.
How did they do it? Well, the next paragraph says the church was concerned that disclosure of the assets in the name of Ensign Peak, a known church affiliate, would lead to negative consequences. What are those? Well, we all know.
Yeah.
In light of the size of the church's portfolio.
That's the members would stop paying tithing.
Yeah, or whatever. I mean, maybe it's just bad publicity. Who knows? All sorts of different consequences, whatever they are. Ensign Peak, this is key. Ensign Peak did not have the authority to implement this approach without the approval of who? The first presidency.
So I'm glad Roger Clark or whoever it was back then wasn't getting thrown under the bus as kind of the fall guy.
No, they tried to do the right thing. But they did it from day one. I mean, it's not like they can say, well, we didn't really realize that we were supposed to file these forms. No, they knew it.
Well, that's where we'll get to it, where the church says, we were just following the advice of counsel.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah. Total bullshit. Excuse me. So there it makes it clear. They did not have the authority to implement this approach without the first presidency's approval. Who made the decision to violate the law? The first presidency. Yeah. It's right here. And the church agreed to this.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did they do in 2001? So they waited a few years. And then in 2001, at Ensign Peak's recommendation, the church created a trust and a separate LLC under the ownership of the trust to file Forms 13F. The church designated Ensign Peak's managing director as the trustee. Ensign Peak filed the first Form 13F, identifying the church's securities in the name of the trust LLC. So not as the church's assets, but as some random company. And by the way, the names of all these LLCs are in the filing. I think you've posted in the show notes, you've got this Religion Unplugged article, which is probably the best thing I've seen, kind of analyzing David's report to Congress. Well, embedded in that article is the report itself. And in that, I think it's in Exhibit A or Attachment A, there is a list of all of these entities. And you can see they're not like, they didn't name them LDS Church LLC sub LLC 1. I mean, Sorry, I mean they
literally like chose names that would not be
the most
known
random names.
and didn't they pick some dude in California that
Yep.
no one would be able to like, right?
I mean, they basically called them like Dave's LLC one, So they, I mean, if there's any doubt that they, that they're trying to hide this stuff, go ahead and read, read. Okay, here they are. In 2017, they had the following 12 LLCs: Argyle Research LLC,
Argyle Research,
Ashmore Wealth Management LLC. Sounds like just some random guy with a big portfolio. Cortland Advisors, Elk Fork Partners, Flinton Capital Management, Glen Harbor Capital Management, Green Valley Investors, Meadow Creek Investment Management, Newburgh Advisors, Riverhead Capital Management, Tiverton Asset Management, and Tires Asset Management. So those are the 12 LLCs that they formed at some point to hide the money, right? And they purposely named them names that were very random. And then they also, but then they became concerned. I'm probably needing to move a little quicker. In paragraph 11, the church became aware that the public might link this first LLC to the church because the person signing the Forms 13F was listed in a public directory as a church employee. Oops. To address this issue, on May 21st, 2005, senior leaders of the church, who's that? First Presidency approved a new reporting entity to be created with better care being taken. This is a quote. Better care being taken to ensure that neither the street nor the media could connect this new entity to Ensign Peak. So they basically, I just don't want to get into this too deep, but they basically formed these LCs, called them random names, formed them outside of Utah. So they were all formed in Delaware, I think. And then they have to assign an address to an LLC, and the addresses that they assigned were all outside of Utah, right? But they have to put like, who's the manager? So who did they put as the manager? Well, they purposefully chose people in I think Ensign Peak or in the church who had very common names, right? So they, instead of a really unique name, they chose Dave Nelson or somebody, I don't think Dave was on them, but someone with a very common name that wouldn't be tied, I mean, we can all look on LinkedIn and see where people look. And if you look up John Dehlin, it's going to be you, right? Yeah. But if you choose a guy named John Smith or whatever. Yeah. And they purposely pick guys that
maybe not Smith.
Yeah. Maybe not that one. Maybe not that one. Nielsen. I don't know. Whatever they chose. So they picked companies
Johnson.
that were the people and put their names on it. Well, and here's a great one down. Okay. This is in paragraph 22. If anyone's doubting me, Ensign Peak was responsible for designating the clone LLC's business managers, many of whom were church employees. Business managers were selected because they had common names and a limited presence on social media and were therefore less likely to be publicly connected to Ensign Peak or the church. So,
I mean, this is super intentional.
Shady. It's shady and intentional.
Forethought deception.
By whom?
By the First Presidency.
By the First Presidency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really quickly, just super quickly. I want to thank Forrest Clay for his super chat, and also Safrania writes a really good point. Thanks for your super chat, Safrania. She writes, doesn't each of the presiding bishopric members have an executive level professional background in finance? This French guy who's the presiding bishop, and Eyring has a Harvard MBA.
Yep.
Like these dudes are not,
right.
I mean, that's why they're in the presiding bishopric of First Presidency.
Right. They're supposed to,
because they understand business, right? Those are great points.
Well, that's pretty much true of the whole First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 now, by the way, after Monson's death. Yeah. They're all professionals.
Everyone, please subscribe to YouTube to help us with subscriptions. Okay, keep going, Mark.
Okay. So
back to...
Okay, but here's the problem. Here's where they messed up. They were fake. And if this whole scheme would have worked, if they would have actually transferred the assets to these individual entities and given them the autonomy, the authority to manage them, then they would have been fine. But because they're such a top-down organization, because they're micromanaged by the First Presidency, they didn't do it, and they couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it. So they kept all of the assets in Ensign Peak.
Controlled by
Ensign Peak. These managers who were designated, these common named guys that they picked, they had zero authority. They had zero ability to do anything. And guess what? By the way, okay, I have to do a shout out. Can I do a shout out, John?
Yeah.
Let's give a shout out. And I don't know his or her name, but somebody in 2018 leaked. They figured out through, I think, IP addresses and their websites that these 12 entities, I think, were connected.
This is the original whistleblower.
The original whistleblower, not David Nilsson, but the guy.
This person has emailed me.
Okay, and it was in
he or she,
sorry, and it was Mormon Leaks put that out, right?
Yeah.
Right. Shout out to Ryan McKnight and his organization. So those guys, that individual who did some really fantastic detective work, figured out that that this was something that he could draw this connection. So when that came out, guess what happened? The guys.
Can I okay, you find that? I'm just going to make the point.
Okay.
Not only was the church intentionally creating fake managers for these fakely named, intentionally located outside of Utah funds, they were signing up its own employees to lie and deceive.
Yeah.
So they're actually
asking
bringing people into the deception and using their authority, asking others to be a part of the deception.
And if you work for the church, I guess you just nod your head and say yes, right? I mean, that's what you do. And these guys didn't push back. And did they know that they were perpetrating basically a fraudulent scheme? I don't know, but they, this, I'm going to be careful about the use of the word fraudulent. This was clearly intended to deceive. You can use the word fraud if you want. That has a little bit different and a connotation in my mind, but because I work in the fraud industry, I mean, fraud is my expertise, but in any event, these guys knew this was shady. They had to have known. And how do we know they knew, John? Well, in paragraph 33, they talk about that leak. They said in May 2018, a public website reported that various entities appeared to have ties to the church, had filed Forms 13F revealing holdings of approximately $32 billion. The website referenced evidence indicating that these entities' domain names were all registered to an entity tasked with overseeing and protecting the intellectual property of the church, and that each of the LLCs identified and listed a business manager whose name matched that of a church employee. So this detective work done by the Mormon Leaks person, who we don't know.
Not Mormon Leaks, by the person I'm in contact with.
Yes.
We'll call him the original leaker.
Okay, yeah.
The original leaker.
As far as I know, he is not a whistleblower per se, in the sense that
he's a snoop. He's
a very talented
snooper
person.
guy.
Yeah. And if you talk to him, you can tell me he's a guy. It's a guy, right? Can you tell me that?
Maybe I shouldn't. But this is totally irrelevant. But would this person even have claim to some of the whistleblower?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
They should contact counsel. But
okay.
There are certain requirements of the SEC's whistleblower program.
Okay.
That have deadlines that have to be met. I will just say that in general.
Okay.
You can't sit on this information for years and then quit and file it down the road. Meanwhile, the fraud goes on. If you're a whistleblower, you have to be quick.
Okay.
And so you have to get in there to the SEC and jump through all the hoops. And there's quite a bit that has to be done. Okay. Actually. So I don't know.
Well, kudos to the original whistleblower.
Yes.
To be either named later or to never be named.
Right. So this is actually kind of funny. In paragraph 34, after the website published or reported this information, two of the business managers resigned. They resigned. They're like, oh crap. I'm involved in something super shady, so I'm done. I'm out. They resigned.
Not resigned from their church employment.
No.
Just from their agreeing to be a part of the scam.
Yeah. They voiced concerns about what they had been asked to do. And rather than changing the LLC structure, two new business managers, two more flunkies were added to assign to replace the two that resigned. So it's like, you go to the front. I don't want to go to the front. Okay, you go.
Replace the pawns.
Replace. Yes. These guys got shot. You go up there. Anyway.
Next in line.
It's actually
next to the firing line.
That's exactly right. Okay. So I want to go back. I jumped ahead, but I just thought that was kind of classic that those guys just, they're like, oh, oops. All right. So in paragraph 10, it talks about that Ensign Peak didn't transfer any of the discretion to these entities. They just sat on it and they kept it all them. And so they were all just fake. And then in March 15th, 2005, the church became aware that the public might link this first LLC to the church. So this, because the name. And so they tried to come up with better names, right? So then in paragraph 12, on December 1, 2005, Ensign Peak formed a second Delaware LLC as a nonprofit corporation. Where was it located? Oh, in Wilmington, Delaware. And they named Ensign Peak's managing director as its manager. Then it filed the forms. So several years later, by the way, that was probably Robert Clark. I mean, Roger Clark, excuse me. Who funny coincidence, when I first started practicing law, I was in Los Angeles, and I was in a ward in a little town called La Cañada, Flint Ridge, and Roger Clark was in my ward. So I didn't really know him because he was too cool, but I was in his ward for a bit of time. Okay, so then they named probably Roger Clark as its general manager. That was also probably a mistake, but anyway. Several years later, 2011, Ensign Peak became concerned that its portfolio had become so big that the filings it made using the name of the secret LLC name might attract unwanted attention. And so it wanted to file more LLCs because, you know, they're getting too big. And all of a sudden, this random LLC that no one's ever heard of, it has one of the biggest portfolios in the country. They're like, oh, crap.
Jesus is getting way too rich.
Yeah. We gotta hide Jesus's money a little more. We can't have that getting out. Yeah. So they created more LLCs. Who approved that? Oh, wait, let's see. Oh, this church's senior leadership. So they actually went to the first presidency and said, hey, we need some more LLCs. We got too much money now. And they're like, okay, yeah, go ahead and make some more. So they did. They formed new clone LLCs for the purpose of filing these forms. 5 new entities were formed. And
really quick. 2011 puts us into Thomas S. Monson, Henry B. Eyring, and Dieter Uchtdorf's administration.
So we're moving on into a new administration. They must deal with all these crazy problems all the time. Makes you wonder what other kind of shady decisions they make. But anyway, this one, clearly, they knew what was right, and they chose not to follow the law. Anyway, so they make more. 5 new entities in 2000.
Make more
11. Yeah, they did. And in
more cowbell, more LLCs.
And then, okay, this is classic. In paragraph 15, in 2015, Ensign Peak became aware that a third party appeared to have connected the holdings of various LLCs back to Ensign Peak. So this is interesting. This is prior to the first guy, the guy that you're talking about, that you've talked to. He was in 2018. Well, in 2015, somebody did some detective work and figured it out before. So what did they do? Ensign Peak brought this issue to the attention of the church. The senior leadership of the church, i.e. the first presidency, approved Ensign Peak's recommendation to, excuse me, gradually and carefully, this is a quote, so it's probably from an email or a memo, gradually and carefully adapt Ensign Peak's corporate structure to strengthen the portfolio's confidentiality. So the first presidency says, do better at hiding the money. Do something more. Come on, guys, use your creativity. So, okay, what did they do? Well, on November 6, 2015, senior leadership of the church approved Ensign Peak's plan for the creation of additional clone LLCs to further prevent disclosure of the church's holdings. Ensign Peak formed 6 more clone LLCs, bringing the total to 12. And we just read all of their names.
And there's no other reason to make 12 other than to dilute the amount of money that appears in each LLC.
Yeah, because before they when they get too big, there are people out there who follow these, that read these Form 13Fs. They are definitely people that track these. Yeah. And as their portfolio gets bigger and bigger, these people are going to be like,
more and more scrutiny.
Who the heck is this? You know, who is this company? I've never heard of them, and they're managing $10 billion. Who the hell is that? You know, and they'll start looking. So again, they wanted to keep it number. Or alternatively, it could be because Jesus had 12 apostles. I'm just saying, it's possible that was why there's 12. You do not know. We do not know. All right. So each of the Ensign Peak was responsible for designating the clone LLC's business managers. Again, they picked common names. We already read that. So then in paragraph 6, I'm going to, so then it kind of gets into, this is classical. So each LLC was also assigned a phone number, a local phone number that would go directly to a voicemail. And Ensign Peak's senior manager was instructed, a business manager of one of the clone LLCs, to notify him if they get any voicemails not from investors, not from members. No, if they get any voicemails from regulatory agencies.
Okay.
That's the quote. No, John, that's what it says. If you get a voicemail from the SEC, let me know. Otherwise, don't worry about it.
Otherwise it says delete all others.
Yeah, right.
Not just ignore them.
Just delete them.
That's destruction. That's destruction of evidence.
Yeah. If the SEC calls, okay, then let me know. Otherwise, forget about it. Who knows? You know, I mean, it's not destruction of evidence if it's just some random. They're probably mostly from people saying, "Hey, I see you have a $20 billion portfolio. I'd kind of like to manage some of that, or can we sell you some of our securities?" They get those sales calls all the time.
Okay.
So this next section talks about the misfiled 13Fs, and we don't really need to go into it very much, other than to say that they were signed by these designated business managers. These fake managers that they designated had to sign these 13Fs that were going to the SEC. And if I were one of those guys, by the way, they're all formerly licensed traders on Wall Street who should know that they were doing something illegal, but they apparently didn't care, or they thought Heavenly Father would protect them, I guess. So even though there were no securities being managed by these entities, these fake entities, they told the managers to sign 13Fs as if they were. So they clearly knew that they had no money, no securities in their portfolio, and yet they signed forms to 13F forms and submitted them to the SEC knowingly. Now, why wouldn't the SEC go after those guys that signed those forms? That's my question. I don't know the answer to that. I think they should. I think those guys, each and every one of them, knowingly filed a false form and submitted it to the federal government, and they should be prosecuted for that, because that's a knowing omission, or they did it knowingly.
And signing it would mean I'm in charge of this.
Yes.
And I've been watching it. And I know what's going on.
Funds. I know
I approve it.
Yes.
And wasn't there something about the timing where sometimes they signed it after these forms had already been submitted?
Yeah, they submitted electronic signatures, and then actually got their handwritten signatures hadn't even been obtained. So in some cases, it's maybe someone filed it and didn't even tell the guy, this poor guy, this schlup who has been assigned to be on the front line and take the hit for the church is taking on significant legal risk and exposure by signing forms that he knows are fake.
They're submitting forms that he hasn't even seen, let alone signed.
Yes.
In his name.
But then later, if he signs it, isn't he going, "What are you doing? What have you done? You put my name on that? No, that's not right."
I'm already wondering why people weren't put in jail for this.
I agree. I mean, but the the response, and we should talk about why the fine was only $5 million, and we can talk about that.
We'll get
there. A lot of people are like, yeah, it's a form. It's a form. Come on, we don't put people in jail for forms. We put them in jail for running a Ponzi scheme. We put them in jail for, stealing money. Well, were people stealing money at Ensign Peak? Well, we don't know, because guess what? They didn't have a compliance department. So who was there tracking whether they had the right policies and procedures in place? My brother is a controller of a publicly traded company. His whole job is to make sure that the company follows the accounting rules in every respect, and he's great at it. Why didn't Ensign Peak, managing one of literally the largest portfolios in the world, why didn't it have a good compliance people to make sure that they don't ask their employees to file fraudulent forms? I mean, come on. That's kind of what compliance people are supposed to do.
I read something about it being reported that some funds would disappear at Ensign Peak.
I don't know. I have no knowledge of that, but I think it wouldn't be surprising to me, because they're just awash in cash.
Yeah.
And who's looking over it? The first presidency?
Yeah.
They expect the first presidency to be compliance people. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, they're way too busy, and they don't understand the issues. So, but they're the ones that made all the decisions, including to file these fake forms. I mean, did the first presidency specifically say to them, "Hey, by the way, use one of your shill employees whose name is very common and doesn't have a social media account, put him on that and make him file the false forms and commit perjury. Is that what the first presidency said? I doubt it, but that's essentially what they told him to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So the church, I don't want to get into this too much, but so I'll just say that in paragraph 30, the church and Ensign Peak understood. That means they had knowledge. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake, John. This is intentional. They knew that Ensign Peak continued to make investment and voting decisions relating to the portfolio, and that the LLC structure was created for the sole purpose of filing the Forms 13F. They all knew it. It wasn't a secret. They knew they were filing false forms and making some random dude sign them on behalf of this entity that was a fake entity. Throughout its history, at least once a year, Ensign Peak's managing director met with the senior leadership of the church to discuss Ensign Peak's activity, including at times the LLC structure. So this is important. They say that every year these guys met with the first presidency to explain what had happened, how much money are we making, look at how big our portfolio is. Oh, and by the way, we've got this great LLC structure with these fake 13F forms that we're filing. Aren't we great?
This would have been Roger.
Roger, and I guess some of his leadership. I don't know who that is.
Okay.
But this next sentence is important. Unanimous approval from the senior leadership of the church, who's that? First presidency, was required before Ensign Peak could deviate from the LLC structure and file Forms 13F in Ensign Peak's own name. So that's kind of important. Many people I've seen in the press have said, wow, why did the church get fined by the by the SEC, excuse me. Why the church? Why wouldn't you just file Ensign Peak, sue Ensign Peak and get them to pay sanctions? Well, this is your answer. The first presidency was behind all this. The first presidency directed it all. The first presidency had the final approval of what they were doing and didn't let them deviate without what? Unanimous vote. So the first presidency had to unanimously agree to deviate. And of course they didn't. They all year after year signed off on illegal conduct. That is why the LDS church was fined $1 million by the SEC. Do you think the SEC likes to fine churches? No. Do they think the SEC likes to take on Mitt Romney's church? No, they don't. It's politically not good for them. You know, this is a very well-connected LDS church. The LDS church has
Mike Lee,
all the big senators. There's multiple senators and representatives from many different states in Congress. The SEC doesn't do a good. It's not good for them to take on the LDS church
or any religion, really,
or any religion, especially the big ones, though, right?
Because they don't even want to go after Scientology these days.
No, of course not. But this is a powerful church, right? And Mitt Romney almost got to be the president. I mean, this is not a small thing to really take them on and fine them $1 million. Why would they do that? Well, I think that's why, going back to my point, that this document is 9 pages long. That's very unusual. They're very short usually. And why is it 9 pages? Because the SEC is trying to tell you and me, please read this order. And this is why we're fining the church $1 million, because the church was in charge of this. The church did this. Sure, Ensign Peak followed orders, but the SEC doesn't fine churches. Maybe the IRS, but not the SEC.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. It's nuts.
I heard there's a history of the SEC not fining corporations large amounts of money, because usually they're publicly held and traded companies, and all that does is punish the shareholders, when in reality it's the executives who are to blame for a lot of this stuff. And so what they care much more about is public embarrassment and shame and accountability on the leadership, and less about ultimately punishing the lay person. I read that somewhere.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's
speculation.
I have represented companies that have been fined hundreds of millions of dollars. So that definitely happens. That's definitely true in Ponzi schemes, where the fines and penalties that are used to pay the SEC don't go to investors. And there are many investors that make that argument. But, you know, let me just put this $5 million in context. Merrill Lynch, all the big banks, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, Goldman, just a few months ago got fined like $500 million for what? Well, because they weren't monitoring their employees' use of text messaging and apps like WhatsApp. So those companies paid $500 million in fines for using text messaging with their clients, literally. Now, that's crazy. That's a lot of money. Now, of course, they're big companies and they can afford to pay it, but they really sent a message. You better take care of this. You better not violate the law. You better monitor what brokerage firms have to monitor employees' communications, and they can't do that when it's texts, right? So it's a big deal. But $500 million sends a message to those firms. You better get your act together. Why wouldn't the SEC in this case say, hey, church, hey, Mormon church, hey, LDS church, you guys need to get your act together. What you did is outrageous. And it was so intentional, and it was so micromanaged by the first presidency itself. You guys need to pay some big fines. But for
wasn't it 0.01% or something like that?
I didn't do the math, but I mean, seriously, I mean, it's a
0.001.
There's a guy that you've done that does a TikTok. I can't remember. He's one of your TikToker friends that you've had on a lot of these. He did the math, and I'm actually trying to stay off TikTok, but I did see this one, and he did the math. Someone should post it.
LDS discussions,
maybe LDS discussions. Yeah. And
Mike.
He said, how much does the church make per minute? And I can't remember what the number was, but someone should really link to that or post it, because it was like $5 million an hour or something. I can't remember what it was, but it was a heck of a lot of money. I mean, the church makes more on its portfolio in a day that it could pay this fine, 10 times over. So this is such a drop in the bucket that my thought is that the intent was to send a message through this long filing rather than to punish the church. Because if you wanted to punish the church, it would have been a bigger fine.
So yeah, Tony wrote, at $5 million, those fines represent about 0.01% of the total reported value of the Ensign Peak portfolio managed on the church's behalf, which according to its latest filing reached $44 billion in value at the end of 2022.
Right.
Yeah.
44 billion, remember, is not the whole picture. That's just the stuff that Ensign Peak manages. They only manage a third of the church's portfolio.
But if the fund makes 7% a year,
yeah.
What times 0.01 equals 7%?
Yeah, I mean, it's like nothing. This is nothing. This is pocket change. This is like telling you to, have you got a quarter in your pocket? Okay, that's your fine. That's basically what the SEC did here. Now, again, I think they sent a powerful message. I mean, it's in every newspaper in the country is talking about it.
Yeah.
The church is very concerned about public relations, and they don't like you and me talking about these things. They don't like all the news articles. And so this is really the biggest punishment, is the bad press.
I think the church would have paid $1 billion to keep this out of the press.
Yes. 100%.
Don't you think?
Oh yeah. And to keep it off and to have it all go away.
Because this is going to cause a crud ton of people to leave the church or stop paying tithing.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, if you knew that the first presidency, who you revere as the prophet, seer, and revelator of the church, is telling its Ensign Peak people to commit fraud, or to at least disguise, to do all of these subterfuges to try to keep that under the radar. I mean, they filed fraudulent filings with the SEC. They didn't get charged with fraud. They could have been, but for whatever reason, the SEC chose not to include that in there. But the charge is a significant one, that they said.
Tony Semerad called it a ruse.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sure. I mean, they basically said that they violated section rule 13F1 and 13F of the Exchange Act. I'm trying to see. Sorry, I didn't underline this piece. So they basically. Oh, here it is. Here it is. As a result of the conduct described above, the church caused Ensign Peak's violations of section 13F1 of the Exchange Act. So this is why the church got fined, is because the church caused it. The church told Ensign Peak to violate the law.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not going to say fraud. I'm going to say violate the law, but that's because I'm a lawyer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I guess to put it, maybe even a finer point on it, not only is the Mormon Church First Presidency, knowingly perpetuating a fraud and recruiting many, many other professionals into their fraud, but through the Temple Recommend interview, millions of Mormons each year are asked, are you honest in your dealings with your fellow men and women?
They should turn around and say, are you?
Yeah. Yeah. But if you drink a cup of coffee, if you don't pay a full 10% of your tithing, you can be kept out of the wedding of your own child. You can be embarrassed and shamed in terms of very public ordinances. You can be kind of marginalized in the church just for like a minor infraction of literally like drinking tea or coffee. And yet the Mormon Church is literally at the highest levels, knowingly perpetuating fraud.
Well, knowingly filing false statements with the SEC. I'm going to say that. Lying, sure.
Yeah.
They're violating the law for sure. And they're knowingly. They had repeated conversations with their people saying, we're supposed to do this. They said, hide it. Hide it repeatedly, year after year after year.
And the point is, it's a really awful, hypocritical double standard.
Okay. But John, let me ask you this. What if you were in the first presidency and I said to you, why did you do that? Why did you do that? What would they say? What would their justification be for going so far to conceal the size of the church's assets?
I mean, I know how they would think. That I think they would just say, listen, we don't need the members' money. The members need to pay tithing so that, one, they can get the blessings, and number two, so that they can learn obedience and learn faithfulness. So we don't want to do anything that would lead the members to not want to obey Heavenly Father's laws.
Okay, but that's ridiculous, because if you're truly faithful and you're a true believer, you're not going to care how big the church's portfolio is. You're not going to care how your money is used. You're just getting your blessings. And if the blessings will open up the windows of heaven, right? So I agree with you, though. I think that is what they would say, and they would say the end.
I think it's what they think and feel and believe.
Yeah. But
then subconsciously, they also don't want the money to stop rolling in.
Well, that's the part I don't get, John. The church doesn't need the money. The church does not need your money. It doesn't need my money. It doesn't need anybody's money. It doesn't even need Mitt Romney's money. They could stop getting tithing today. You've said this before, I think. They could go on in perpetuity, just running off of the interest and the income from these investments. This is a massive portfolio.
Yeah,
massive.
Let's just assume the portfolio's 180 billion at this point of all the different
income generating
real estate.
Yeah, all of it.
Let's just assume it's 180 billion. It could be more, it could be less. It could be a fraction of this. We don't know. But 7% annually, 6% returns, pick whatever you want, 5%.
5%. What's that?
That's still going to then cover the church's $8 or $9 billion annual operating budget.
Yeah.
So they don't need your tithing. Literally,
they absolutely do not need
They could pay the church's operational budget off of the interest from Ensign Peak investments.
100%. And they could operate janitorial. They could actually hire a janitor maybe or two. They could, have groundskeepers for all the churches. Their operating expenses are high, sure. But this is what's the math on 5% of 200 billion? If it's that's $10 billion a year in conservative revenue, right? Is my math right? I mean, that's a lot of money. And the church's tithing revenues, according to the David Nelson filing, are between $5 and $7 billion a year in tithing revenues, not all of which is used. So a surplus goes in. So if this is the important piece, the Ensign Peak portfolio generates more income than tithing already by a long shot.
Yeah.
Billions more.
And that's just what we know of.
That's what we know of. Yeah.
It could be more.
That's just the portfolio. What about all the real estate that they own? And they're going to make tons of money on this massive Florida real estate project they're working on. They're buying, stuff all over the world. And they one of the largest landowners in the world already. So that generates income as well. The church does not need your money.
Yeah. One a commenter wrote 12.6 billion a year at 7%. So thanks for that math. Yeah.
$12 billion a year. And the church's tithing revenues, at least before David Nelson's report came out, their tithing revenues were apparently between $5 and $7 billion. So they're making double the amount of money on their investment portfolio than they are in tithing revenues.
Yeah.
But it's not about that, John.
Yeah.
It's about proving your worthiness.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Okay.
Keep paying your tithing.
Okay. All right. Okay. So that's the order that the church agreed to and signed off on. Where should we go next in our outline?
So can I just say one quick thing about this is I've said it before. This is an unusually detailed order more detailed than any I've ever seen with the SEC. I think that was done intentional, and I think it was intent to send a message. The order sends more of a message than the fine. The order is where the message is, not the fine.
Yeah.
And people need to focus on that. The problem is it's kind of
hidden or obscured or hard to find, and, and legalistic. And
by the way,
we need someone like you to understand all this.
Right. And there's lawyers out there that specialize this. The other thing is, if Ensign Peak was serious about complying with the law and wanted to know, hey, how are we going to do this? We're not sure about these fake companies we're forming. Is that okay? Who should they have called? They should have called the SEC. The SEC answers those kind of questions, and they could have, and even though they didn't have much of a compliance department, we don't know what their lawyers were telling them, but we do know that they always had the SEC to call, and the SEC will tell you, no, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Do we need to file these forms? Yeah, you do. They could have called the SEC at any given time, but they instead chose to kind of flout the SEC. They filed these fake filings instead of doing their best to comply with the law, and it was intentional. So it's a dead horse that we're beating, but it's really important.
So really quickly, you probably already answered this, but the whistleblower percentage, the 10 to 30%, will that be of the 5 million or is that of a different number?
Of the 5 million.
Okay. And I got a sense you weren't happy about the 5 million from the whistleblower perspective, not because you necessarily stand to gain. I'm sure you care about David. He's made huge financial career sacrifices.
Yeah.
If he's now splitting this some big percent with his attorney, his representation, whoever that is,
and possibly other whistleblowers, we don't know,
then he's not going to maybe get what he needs to kind of recoup.
Well, that's the point I want to make, is that, first of all, I know David, and he did not do this for the money. I can tell you that for a fact. I know that. He did it because he is ultimately a very honest guy, and was offended by the subterfuge, the illegality that he observed when he worked for the church. And I think, that's a story he's going to tell. And at some point we're all going to hear that story. And I look forward to it. I've heard it, but I hope all of you can hear it too. Cause when you meet this guy, you will understand it was not about the money. Now, as a lawyer, like I said, I get paid through these whistleblower awards. That's how I get paid in my practice. I would be disappointed in this award. Yes. But this is not the full picture, because David also, the bigger piece of this, of what he did, is in the IRS. So just keep that in mind. The IRS case has not concluded. It's ongoing. We don't know exactly what's going on, but I have read his filings. I've read the submissions, and I know that the bigger exposure the church has are to lying to the IRS about foreign assets that they had, lying to the IRS on what are called FUBARs. They misstated all sorts of things in their filings with the IRS, and I think that has a bigger exposure to the church. Now, let me say, I'm an SEC whistleblowing is most of what I do, so IRS and tax is not really my area of expertise, but my understanding is that that's where they expect to hit the big money.
I mean, logic suggests to me that if the SEC now is going to publicly rule not in favor of the church and against the church, that has to at least slightly, if not more, increase the probability that the IRS ruling might follow suit.
Yeah.
I've heard some people wonder, well, there's an IRS office in Ogden, so does that mean Mormons are going to kind of scuttle this and keep the IRS whistleblower thing from ever happening?
I
mean, we're all speculating.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, the office in Ogden is not where all the investigators are. They're mostly in DC.
Yeah.
Also, there's always the Department of Justice. If there's illegality here, there could be still the potential of criminal sanctions. I would love to see something like that. I would love to see these folks held accountable criminally for the work.
So there still could be.
There could be. Yeah.
FBI.
I'm not making a prediction. I'm just saying there are investigations ongoing. The IRS, the DOJ do not tell you, much to my chagrin. In our cases, one of the hardest parts about representing whistleblowers is the lack of information. We don't have a clue what usually is going on, but if you look at the filing that they just made with the Senate Finance Committee, you will see that most of it is focused on IRS violations, not SEC violations. This 13F filing issue is really almost an aside for the filing. Can I say one other thing is that for those who are listening, in the show notes, I asked John to put the phone number for the Senate Finance Committee. And if you are interested in helping, if you're interested in helping this and encouraging the Senate to look into this, maybe even hold public hearings, they can also encourage the IRS to go after this and really follow through. One of the ways that you can help is by calling the number that is in the show notes for the Senate Finance Committee and leaving a message. I don't know if they answer the phone or not, or sending a letter and faxing it. There's a fax number there. I don't think they have an email that we were able to track down, but that's one way you could help David in his quest to hold the church accountable for their conduct.
Yeah, and the number is 202-224-4515. That's the phone number, 202-224-4515. The fax number is 202-228-0554. And as someone who worked on Capitol Hill, that is a major way, and I'm sure it's true in 2023.
Oh, yeah.
That is a major way senators know that people care, is if their phone lines light up. Yep. That actually registers as a significant issue. So if everyone, this podcast already has thousands of listeners, if the tens or hundreds of thousands of listeners to this podcast all were to call that number and just light up that phone number for days, if not weeks, that might have an influence. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Not only that, but if you're in a state and you can track down the number for your senator,
local senator,
you can actually call their office too and encourage them to hold the LDS Church accountable for violating the law in multiple ways, as alleged by David Nilsson. And that if you're interested in reading the details of how he says they've done that, you can get the 90-page memo that was submitted to the Senate Finance Committee. It's embedded in the Religion Unplugged article.
Yeah, we're including a link to that as well in the show notes for sure.
Yeah. So that could move the bar, because if they think this is just going to disappear, putting pressure on Congress in various ways, you have listeners all over the country, I'm sure. And if they all over the world, and if they can call their senators and encourage them to take action, that would be super great.
Okay. Listeners and viewers, please do it.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing we can do now is I can read the church's response and have you respond to the church's response, unless there's a place you want to go next.
No, I think that's helpful. And I think the main point I wanted to just make is that as we're going to talk about this statement, I may have said this, John, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but when you settle with the SEC, as part of your settlement, you have to agree in writing. The church had to agree when they settled with the SEC that they would not issue a press release that materially disputes the findings in the order. So what we just went through, all those details, all the involvement of the first presidency, all of the machinations and the plotting, the year after year deciding again to violate the law, all of that stuff the church has agreed to, and they cannot issue a press release without violating SEC rules that materially disputes that. They can't do it, right? I can't settle with the SEC and then issue a press release tomorrow and say, hey, that was all bullshit, and I shouldn't have, I didn't mean any of it, right? You can't do that. If you settle, you settle. Now, in the settlement, the church does not admit or deny, right? So there's some language at the beginning of the order we just went through where the church basically says, we don't admit or deny these allegations. We're not saying they're right, but we're not denying them either. So you can't issue a press release that denies them. They can't do it.
Yeah.
I think they've done that here.
So you think they violated that spirit of
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. Now
you can tell us where when I read it.
I'm assuming that they ran this through past their legal team, and so we could dispute about it. but they throw lawyers under the bus. They throw everybody under the bus, and we can go through it. But it's this most ridiculous press release I've ever seen. I mean, it's so, after what we just went through, to then read this press release, you'll make it seem like this was just like a
Okay, well, let's do it. I'll read it. And listen, your job, Mark, is very simple. You pause me at any exact word where you want to make a comment.
Okay.
And I'll remember where I was reading. And then after you've made your comment, I'll go back to where we were.
All right.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. This is February 21st, 2023. Maven will include this in the live stream and in the show notes. This is, and the church may change this, right? I mean, most likely, if this is bad, they'll delete it or rewrite it.
I think they should.
This is the version that was.
I'd be nervous if this was out there.
Yeah. This was. I emailed this to I knew that the church deletes and changes things. So on February 21st at 3:43 p.m., I copied the text of this internet posting and emailed it to myself. So, all right. So as of that time and date. The church, this is called Church Issue Statement on SEC Settlement. The church released the following statement on Tuesday, February 21st, 2023. The Church of Jesus, and you pause me, all right, Mark?
Okay.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its affiliated investment manager, Ensign Peak Advisors, Inc., have settled a matter with the Securities and Exchange Commission, or the SEC.
So let me just say this is really interesting that they called Ensign Peak a, quote, affiliated investment manager, because what they've said in here, and the position I understood they took in the investigation of the SEC, was that Ensign Peak is not separate, but it's an integral part of the church. This makes it sound like they're basically an outside investment manager, which I think contradicts the conclusions that were in this order in some minor way. I think that's more of a legalistic kind of interpretation, but they had to take the position in order to avoid some of these reporting requirements that the Ensign Peak was part of the church. It's not separate. But here they're saying it's an affiliated investment manager. And by the way, investment advisors have to be licensed by the SEC. Investment managers, I don't even know what that is. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Investment managers who oversee a portfolio of public equities above a certain threshold are required to file Forms 13F with the SEC quarterly. These forms publicly disclose the names of the securities and their values.
Right.
Okay, we've covered that.
Yeah.
Since 2000, Ensign Peak received and relied upon legal counsel regarding how to comply with its reporting obligations while attempting to maintain the privacy of the portfolio. Now, if you don't stop me, I'm going to stop there.
Okay, well, so that's, yeah. I mean, what are you going to say about that? Because I have a lot of concern.
Relied upon legal counsel. That's basically saying the lawyers told us to do this.
This is throwing the lawyers under the bus, right? It was not our idea. The lawyers told us that. Listen, I'm sure they had legal counsel. I'm positive they did, and they probably had good legal counsel. But the lawyers, I'm sure, did not tell them to create fake entities and file false 13Fs. The lawyers would not have said that.
Yeah.
No lawyer in his right mind would have given that advice. I'm sorry. I think they didn't follow their advice. But you notice they said they relied upon it, but they didn't say they followed it.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone wrote that very carefully.
But they also mentioned while attempting to maintain the privacy of the portfolio. So they're talking about privacy. Is privacy another word for what?
Well, I don't know.
Keeping it secret, right?
They
want to keep it secret.
Yeah.
Were they worried about privacy? Like someone's name?
I think so.
What funds are being invested in?
No, they weren't. I mean, privacy is a word for it, I suppose.
Okay. As a result, Ensign Peak established separate companies, or LLCs, that each filed Forms 13F instead of a single aggregated filing. Ensign Peak and the church believed that all securities required to be reported were included in the filings by the separate companies.
Okay.
No
They're
problem.
Missing the key point, which is they were fake. The companies were fake. The companies didn't control the securities. They didn't have it. They were all fake filings. They created these separate companies, but they never gave autonomy. They never gave control over the portfolio to the company. And that's the key. And that's the part where I think I assume that they didn't follow their lawyer's advice. the first presidency may or may not have had lawyers in the room when they made these decisions.
And I was taught as a Mormon growing up, there's complete honesty, and then there's kind of partial truths or hiding things. But hiding things is not complete honesty.
I agree.
Isn't, I mean,
yeah. Well, but you know, the end justifies the means, John. Got to keep the money coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not the standard of honesty that I was taught as a Mormon growing up.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. Because they should be admitting that this was a ruse. Okay. The truth, to be fully accountable and for this to sort of meet, let's just say we're trying to meet the standards of repentance, which is to acknowledge the sin, to confess the sin, and then to make restitution and forsake the sin. They're not adequately confessing or acknowledging their sin. True?
True there.
Okay.
They haven't, I mean, compare what we just read with this mealy mouth response.
They should have just linked to the IRS ruling.
Here's
the order.
Here's the history. It's all right there.
Yeah, but they didn't do that. Okay. In June 2019, the SEC first expressed concern about Ensign Peak's reporting approach. Now, someone had speculated that they're choosing that date of June 2019 so that no one will think that it was David Nielsen or the original whistleblower who kicked all this off.
I suppose that could be true. I don't know what happened with the SEC. There's really no way to know that.
Okay.
The dates in this, it does say that in this order in paragraph 33 that in May of 2018, the public website reported that various entities appeared to have been ties to the church, had filed forms. So the timing of it is odd. I mean, I assume that if the SEC did approach the church in June of 2019, that was prompted by this Mormon Leaks publication. That's my assumption.
Which really the credit goes to the original whistleblower.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Or who knows who the 2015 person was.
Right. Of the two whistleblowers.
Two of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Potentially.
Really quickly, I just want to thank, because our show depends on this, Pat, Ambassador for Truth, gives a super chat and says, thank you, bringing this out to the masses. This will catch fire. Luke 12:2, things hidden will be exposed. That's what Jesus said, apparently. Thanks, Pat, for the super chat. Thanks to all of you who donate. And then my buddy, Bo Euler. Hey, Bo. He wants to talk about tax exempt status and religions. We'll try and save that for the end. But okay. Bo, thank you for the super chat. Thanks to everyone who's donating through super chats, and please subscribe to YouTube and to Facebook because that helps so much with the algorithms. Okay, let's get back to the reading.
Okay, can I just point out something in there what you just wrote?
Yeah,
what you just read. Sorry, in June 2019, the SEC first expressed concern about Ensign Peak's reporting approach. Period. Right. Period.
Yeah.
There's no date on the second sentence. Ensign Peak adjusted its approach and began filing a single aggregated report. When did they do that? I don't think they did it in 2019. People have been paying attention to these 13F filings now because of David Nielsen's report and the other publicity. When did they start filing the single aggregated report? I believe it was much later than that, but they carefully left a date off of that second sentence on when did they start filing the aggregated. I don't know the answer to that myself.
Well, if you divide 13 by 4 quarters, you get 3 years, and it's 2013. So I don't know.
2023, I mean?
Yeah, it's 2023 now. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe some months went by. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. What I'm saying is I'm not sure.
By putting the sentence immediately after the June 2019, it seems like they're trying to create the impression that they immediately complied.
Yeah, but that next sentence doesn't say that. If you read it carefully, it just says, we did that. But it doesn't say when. And from representing these companies when they're being investigated, I can tell you that you don't immediately change your behavior the minute you get a call from the SEC. It doesn't work that way. It's a very detailed, long process. And the other thing is, my understanding is that Ensign Peak filed 2 of those quarters not under Ensign Peak. They filed under different names. And if you look at the public record, you will see that it was only in February of 2020 that they finally put their own name on that filing. February 2020.
Can I just note, and this may be obvious, nowhere in this statement does it say we didn't file the 13Fs for over a
20
decade,
years.
like
2
we
years,
should.
2 decades.
2 decades.
Yeah.
Nowhere does it say we screwed up by not.
No.
I didn't read that anywhere.
No, and it also didn't say that we did file some reports, but under fake names with fake managers and under entities that actually didn't hold any assets.
So it's
They did not say
totally,
that.
it's more cover up kind of stuff. It's deception on top of deception.
Well, they could have said maybe an angel with a flaming sword told them to do it, I suppose, but they didn't say that either.
Moxie, a little salty.
But
Okay.
it's close. They went to the first presidency. They went to the prophet himself,
Yeah.
and the prophet said, hide the money.
Yeah. Okay. Since that time, 13 quarterly reports have been filed in full accordance with the SEC requirements. And that's meaning a single report each quarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
For 3 years and a month.
Yeah. And that,
and a
again,
quarter.
that report only represents the filings they did make finally, belatedly, after all the publicity came out. The filings they did made only represent a small fraction of their portfolio. It's not the whole portfolio.
Yeah.
It's just a third of it,
Okay.
basically.
This settlement relates to how the forms were filed previously. What are they trying to say there?
Well, I wish they would have linked to the settlement right there.
Yeah.
The order, this order, they don't like this order. They would have put a link under this settlement
Yeah.
because they don't want people to read what we just went through.
And that's on
It's
brand. The
too
church
detailed.
hides the details,
Yeah, well,
from its members for
That's
two
why I had to
centuries.
point everyone out to the press release from the SEC and this little link on the side. If you don't notice that link,
Yeah.
you'll never find this report.
Yeah, and we've included it and we'll include it. Ensign Peak and the church have cooperated with the government over a period of time as we sought resolution.
Of course.
Okay. Last statement before the frequently asked
This
questions.
is the best right here.
This is your favorite?
Yeah, this is my favorite.
All right, everyone,
Favorite
hold on to your hat. We affirm our commitment to comply with the law, regret mistakes made, and now consider this matter closed. Let's take each of those 3 things separately. So we affirm our commitment to comply with the law. That almost sounds like we always have believed and obeyed the law. It's business as usual. We always obey the law.
What are you talking about? We always comply with the law. Well, except for that 20 years. and except for the part that Monson and Hinckley and all these guys basically told us to, but okay. But we
always
what's
do.
what's that article of faith again? Anyway, but this next piece, comma, regret mistakes made. Honestly,
okay, wait. We have to say that the Dehlin H. Oaks, currently the second highest ranking member of the Mormon Church, and an attorney, is on record as saying we neither seek nor request apologies. In other words, the church doesn't make mistakes, make apologies.
Sure.
That's probably what the attorneys have told him. He's an attorney. That's probably basic attorney recommendation, right?
Okay. First of all, John, that's the stupid. I mean, it's not even. There's not even a. I can't remember all my grammar, but this is not a good sentence. Regret states made. Who regrets?
It's passive voice.
It's not even
mistakes
passive.
were made.
There's no object in
Mistakes were made.
Yeah, mistakes were made. But the question is
by who?
But by whom?
Yeah.
Who regrets the mistakes made? Does the church regret it?
But there was a book called "Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me."
Not by me.
And they probably are smart enough to know that. So instead, they rephrased it and said, "Regrets."
We regret our lawyers gave us such crappy advice. I guess they could have thrown the lawyers under the bus again. But why don't they say we? They couldn't even include a we, John. we, the church, regret that some mistakes were made by somebody, some minor employee in the church office building. We don't know who that person. No, I mean, own it, guys. If you're going to give a ridiculous apology, just put a we in that little piece, right? We regret mistakes were made, or we regret that Ensign Peak made some dumb decisions. I don't know. But that's just so odd the way they wrote that. And now consider this matter closed, which to me says, okay, members, it's done. It's over with. Nothing to see here. Move on.
Yeah, these are not the George you're looking for. Yes. And let's don't talk about this anymore.
Yeah. It's not a big deal.
But that's not even true because we know the IRS stuff is still being investigated.
No, we're moving on.
But there could still be criminal investigations, and there could still be.
We're moving on, John. We're moving on now.
Maybe that's why there was that sentence about trying to limit or contain what this statement and this settlement refers to. It's not talking about taxes.
Right.
It's not talking about criminal behavior. And in that sense, maybe they want to say they consider this matter closed.
Yeah. Well, okay, fine, whatever. I just think it's the stupidest. I don't know who wrote that, but someone probably wrote "we." They probably had a "we" in there at some point, and then someone in the first presidency, who apparently manages all this stuff, said, "Take out the 'we,' because we don't apologize." I mean, maybe Dehlin Oaks himself intervened and said, "Take out that 'we." I don't know, but it's just the worst apology ever. I give them no credit for that.
Would you mind if I read an article from faithful Mormon,
Sure,
Sam Brunson, in the By Common Consent blog? He has a really good blog post called "The Church, the Investment Advisor in the SEC." Hasn't he been defending the church this whole time? Or at least sort of like,
I think when he read this order that we just went through, then he seems to be backing off a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, historically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just make one other point
Please.
about this semi shitty apology? Excuse me if you can bleep that. Why did they say mistakes in that sentence? Where's the mistake? I mean, I don't see anything in that order that we read that was a mistake. It was intentional.
Yeah.
Every single bit of it was intentional. There was no mistake. It was repeatedly, year after year, brought to the first presidency for approval. First presidency says, keep doing it. Keep concealing it. There's no mistake there. This is very
mistake
deception.
is like, oh, I wrote a B instead of a Q.
Yes.
Let me erase it because I accidentally did something. It was intentional for decades.
Absolutely.
With forethought.
20 years of intentional.
While being advised against what they were doing, they overrode advice.
Yes.
And not only violated the law, but recruited others to join in that.
If they'd said, we apologize for breaking the law for 20 years intentionally, then okay, maybe I'd give them some credit. But this is a terrible statement.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a cop-out. Sorry. It just makes me so mad.
So I'll read. Is it okay if I read?
Just skip down to "Did the church know?" That's really the other stuff. Is
totally. Well, you mean in the BCC article?
No, go read that. Yeah, read that first.
Okay. So again, faithful Mormon Sam Brunson on faithful apologetic blog By Common Consent.
Yeah.
There's
by
a section.
the way, is a tax lawyer. He's not a securities lawyer.
Right.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
It's not his area.
So he has a section at the end called "What to Make of This," and this is his reaction to your concern. He writes, "This is Sam Brunson. I've spent a lot of time explaining why the sturm and drang over the EPA's taxes is overblown, and I stand by that. With what has been brought to light by the whistleblower and by others, but not with securities law. It's telling that their release, the church stated that, quote, it regrets mistakes made, a statement that, frankly, as passive as it is as close to an expression of wrongdoing as I've ever heard the church make." And that's true. The church doesn't come anywhere close to.
The bar is very low.
Not even for like the Mountain Meadows Massacre does the church say, "I'm sorry."
I know.
They're like, "Oh, we regret that people got hurt,"
But why don't we hold them to a higher standard, John? I mean, we can't compare the church against itself. That's not fair.
Well, let's read what
compare them to reality in the real world.
Well, let's read what the faithful people are feeling, who are in the know.
Great.
Sam writes, but here's the thing. The church didn't make a mistake. It's not that it was unaware that EPA or Ensign Peak had a filing requirement. EPA informed the top church hierarchs almost immediately that it needed to file 13Fs. We've already talked about this.
Yeah.
But rather than comply with the law, top church leaders, meaning the first presidency, decided to obfuscate, to stretch the law to, or in my humble opinion, beyond the breaking point. It's not that mistakes were made. It's that the church took deliberate action to do wrong. This is a faithful Mormon, okay? and he goes on. And how should we as active members look at this deliberate action to do wrong? I don't think there's any way to justify it, and I don't think members should be asked to justify it. After all, we believe in being honest. To receive a temple recommend, we have to affirm that we're honest in our dealings. Seriously, honesty is such a lonely word. He throws in a Billy Joel quote there from the song Honesty. Kudos to Sam Brunson for the Billy Joel reference. I love that's one of my go-to.
Oh yeah,
that's one of my go-to karaoke songs. Is Honesty by Billy Joel. And this is Sam Brunson. And in spite of our teachings and belief, the top church leaders chose dishonesty. They chose not only to bend the law but to break it. Now it's actually. I'm trying to remember. The church just got rid of the prohibition on loud laughter in the temple. Do we know if they got rid of evil speaking of the Lord's anointed? Because this is coming a little close to that. And I'm a little bit worried for Sam Brunson's temple recommend because he's basically saying that the church leaders chose dishonesty and to break the law. Anyway, I digress. And it's worth noting that since 2019, Ensign Peak Advisors has filed its Forms 13F, the church and EPA acknowledged that they had acted wrongly. They fixed the problem and paid the necessary fine, which leads to the last line of the church's statement. We affirm our commitment to comply with the law, regret mistakes made, and he bolds the next words, now consider this matter closed. He's upset. He's bolding this last little 5 words that you were also not loving. He goes on to write, Sam Brunson, faithful Mormon Sam Brunson. So here's the thing. The church may consider the matter closed, but it's not, says Sam Brunson. This represents a real betrayal to the millions of church members who have worked hard to live up to their standards, to be honest, even where it's hard, to obey the law, even where it's inconvenient. It represents a deeply disappointing disclosure to the millions of saints who have looked to the church as a model for how to act and how to live. Sam Brunson's taken the church to the woodshed, the Mormon Church First Presidency, back out to the woodshed, and saying, quote, this matter is closed, close quote, doesn't address that betrayal, that disappointment, that hypocrisy. To move forward, the church needs to address its error, not to the SEC. It's already done that, I guess, but to its members. It's to its membership. It needs to explain what went wrong, why it went wrong, how it will ensure it doesn't go wrong again. And I would say, where else has it gone wrong that it did not get caught with its hand in the cookie jar? That might also need to be added to your blog post, Sam Brunson. Because wouldn't that be incumbent on the church to say, where else are we deceiving and hiding things? Because this can't be the only instance.
They don't have a compliance department, John. I mean, they have like one guy. I don't think they know.
This cannot be the only instance of the church being deceptive.
Sure.
Right?
Oh, you're causing me to lose my testimony.
Members have believed that the church represents a model for their lives for a long time. And even in the wake of this news, the church can do that. It can model how to repent and come back from severe errors. But simply paying a fine, then ignoring the harm, and I would say not really owning up to its mistakes, and then trying to silence everyone and not talk about it anymore, is not that model. Church members deserve better. The institutional church deserves better. And I'm guessing that Sam Brunson, this won't affect his allegiance to the church. Maybe it might not even affect his tithing status with the church. And I'm sure the people in the By Common Consent blog might continue to keep, supporting the church in all the ways people would support it. So sometimes I wonder, do progressive Mormons, other than Jenna Reese, as you so kindly noted, do progressive Mormons do anything to hold the church accountable other than to write blog posts? I don't know.
Right. Well, and By Common Consent, which is a great blog that he writes for, is not well read outside of the liberal Mormon stratosphere. I mean, he's an active member. I've been annoyed, to be honest, that Peggy Fletcher Stack at the Tribune keeps interviewing the guy who really doesn't know this stuff. But
up till now, from a tax perspective, has kind of been more apologetic, saying there's no big deal. Yeah,
no, but I give him credit. I mean, he really takes on the church, and I wish he would have that similar. I have the similar response to other issues, legal issues that the church is fighting with. One of them is the sex abuse scandal, which I think is boiling underneath the surface of agreements that the church has caused people to sign that won't let them talk about it. I think there are thousands of victims out there, and I wish the church would just come clean about the extent of sex abuse in the church that is going on today, and do background checks and just deal with the problem. I wish he would address that same criticism on other issues where the church is hiding things too. It's not just their finances that they hide. And
I don't know how much Sam Brunson gets credit for courage here, or just how outrageous this SEC thing is. I think he read this order and got pissed off because I listened to his interview with Peggy right before this came out. It was like 2 days before, it hadn't come out yet, and he was kind of like, yeah, it's going to be a nothing burger. And then he read this and he got pissed. And more power to him. Okay. All right. So I think we've addressed the church's general statement. Now we've got the frequently asked questions. Is that okay? Sure. And I'm not going to read all of it. There's who is Ensign Peak Advisors? Is that a problem? Their answer. No. Who is the SEC? What are Forms 13F? Yeah, keep going. Did the church know about the practices at Ensign Peak described in the order? Maybe I should read that one. This is a dodge right here. This is a classic legal dodge. Right. So I'll read it. So did the church? Okay, wait. Okay. Think about the question first. Did the church know? Okay, now the answer. Okay. The church's senior leadership received and relied upon legal counsel when it approved of the use of the external companies to make the filings. Right there. How does that answer that question? It's saying that someone else recommended it and then it approved it. Yeah. But they don't have it. No one had authority to recommend it or like only the first presidency. Did the first presidency know? Well, we don't know because we know from the SEC's order that they did, but here they're like, well, they relied on legal counsel, but they don't say yes or no in response to that question. Then they throw Ensign Peak under the bus. So they're just like a mere functionary. Ensign Peak handled the mechanics of the filing process. Okay. Under the direction of the first presidency, they met with yearly, right? Annually, if not more. Yeah. And then the last sentence, the church's senior leadership never prepared the paperwork. Wait, it says never prepared or filed the specific reports at issue. So Russell and Nelson, Thomas S. Monson did not actually file the report. Okay. Oh, great. That answers the question. No, I mean, of course they did. We know they did. The church agreed to this order that the SEC issued. They agreed to all this language and they knew it was happening. And this is just a dodge. I mean, that's like a few months shy of her 14th birthday kind of language. Yeah, exactly. The first presidency didn't file the filings. Oh, really? They didn't? Okay. Ensign Peak did it. Okay. They throw Ensign Peak under the bus and they throw the lawyers under the bus. But of course the senior leadership, they never filed the paperwork. Well, okay. I mean, what they want people to think is these are old men. They're worried about the spiritual well-being of the membership. They don't know. It's like Phil Hartman's Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer, like my primitive mind can't handle these complicated SEC filings. You know what I mean? Well, they also didn't say the church directed, the senior leadership of the church did direct filing of those reports. That's the point. The church directed it. They year after year approved it and actually told them to do it. Yeah. They didn't. Yeah. It wasn't like they were acting on their own. And the order makes that very clear multiple times. 100%. And they also got some random functionaries to act as fake leaders of these things. They threw them under the bus too. What it's also not saying, and maybe you just said this, but what the order said is that the first presidency overrode the counsel of the attorneys, and I'm sure of Ensign Peak. Very good point. It wasn't that they took their recommendations; they overrode the proper recommendations for a couple decades. Why? Until they got their hand caught in the cookie jar. All about the money, John. That's if you wonder what drives the first presidency, there's your answer. Yeah. They instructed these guys to violate the law because they were all about the money. I mean, Jesus said you can't serve God and mammon, Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. He also, threw up some tables at the temple because of the money changers. I mean, again, my conversation with my mom, do you think Jesus would really just hoard $100 billion in the stock market if he was here, or would he use it and then hide and lie about it? Yeah. I mean, seriously, it's just silly. Okay. Has the reporting practice that prompted the SEC cease and desist order now stopped?
Yes.
So do I need to read that?
At least they answered that question. And then the question is, did they do it voluntarily? Well, no, they did it. That's actually not a bad answer. The SEC expressed concern, and then so we fixed it. Okay. That's the same language, I think.
In the statement. Yeah. It's kind of a copy paste repeat of what was in the first statement. Okay. Did Ensign Peak fail to comply with SEC regulations?
Another dodge.
Okay. The answer is so now it's saying the question's about Ensign Peak, but this is written by the church, not Ensign Peak. And yet it says we reached resolution with the SEC. But there's no answer there. Did they fail to comply? They don't say. They say we reached a resolution.
And a lot of companies will do that, by the way. A lot of companies will say, well, we didn't want to fight it. We didn't want to draw it out. We wanted to put it behind us. So we settled. That's kind of what they're saying. But I wish they would have said yes, because clearly the answer is yes.
Yeah, absolutely. We affirm our commitment to comply with the law, regret mistakes made.
Same language,
and now consider this matter closed. Yeah. I want to go after that again, but we'd be beating a dead horse there, or dead taper, one of the two. Yeah. Don't want to beat a dead taper. Okay, so next question: when will the penalties be paid? Penalties will be paid shortly to the U.S. Treasury. There's that's pretty straightforward. The church has the money. Where does the $5 million come from to satisfy the settlement? Here's a good one. The investment returns of the church will be used to pay the settlement. In other words, not the tithing.
Right, but that's the tithing's in there. It's all commingled in accounts. It's the tithing. Tithing was used to pay this settlement for sure.
It's like they have a bank account for tithing.
No, exactly. No.
Bank account
maybe they should have. They should have had it, in a.
But that's not how money works.
No, and that's not what they did.
As soon as an investment gains a return, the funds are commingled. There's no way to hey, Charles Schwab, hey, Fidelity, put the return in a totally different account. So the principle remains
maybe
unchanged.
They could have, but they didn't. And David Nielsen's very clear about that. They did not do that.
Okay. All right, but no tithing was used. That's like not learning, because that was the Roger Clark stuff from the beginning. No tithing,
right?
And David Nielsen saw that that the church was declining, and this is James Huntsman's point.
Yeah,
is that everyone in the world was told that the City Creek Mall was not built with tithing dollars. The presiding bishopric stated that, and yet David Nielsen knew from his insider information, the Inside Peak, that tithing dollars absolutely were used.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy part is that's one of the only things the money was used for. I mean, honestly, what is it good for having $100 billion if you don't use it for something? They build a temple with it. I don't care, but you built a mall. It's like, okay, that's your choice.
Yeah. Okay. I guess the church had all these, once upon a time, had all these commercial ventures like Beneficial Life. And I don't know if those were almost like mafia front companies, so that the church could claim that if it had to spend money on something, that it came from their commercial interests, not from tithing. But even then, those commercial interests would have been bought by tithing or investments. So
my understanding, and I'm not a historian, but my understanding is that they did that because back in Brigham Young's day, they wanted ZCMI and some of these companies to be all so that people brought their business to church-owned enterprises. So they set them all up. Then they had Deseret News as a mouthpiece of the church, which it still is, maybe more so now than it was in those days. It's clearly propaganda, not a church, not a magazine, or not a newspaper.
Okay. We're almost done with the Q&A. How are the church's reserves invested? Following the principle of preparing for the future, both near and long-term, and very long-term, I'll add as a joke. The church maintains diversified reserves, including stocks, bonds, commercial and residential real estate, and agricultural properties. All funds are invested solely to support the church's mission. Any response there, Mark?
Well, yeah, but what is it that those stocks and bonds are serving? My recollection from Sunday school is the threefold mission of the church is to
proclaim the gospel, perfect the saints, and redeem the dead. And I think they tweaked that.
Yeah, but which one of those three is money necessary for?
Yeah,
I don't think any. They don't even use their funds to send missionaries on. Why don't they tell missionaries, you don't have to pay for your mission anymore? We got you.
Right.
We got a lot of money here. we're good.
Or
You
BYU, free tuition for everybody.
Yeah, do it. It
Or like, we don't need your fast offerings.
Right.
Whoever needs money or the rent paid, we could cover that.
Or if you want food from the Bishop Storehouse, you're good. You don't need to work. Just come on in and we'll get you something.
Yeah.
I mean, that in that case, I think those funds would be used to support the church's mission. But
I mean, in fairness, the church believes in self-sufficiency and they don't believe in the dole. That's Ezra Taft Benson's
and I'm sure
legacy.
That's response. But what in building a mall, which of the threefold mission of the church does the mall come associate with?
Or the beneficial life bailout.
Or the beneficial life bailout. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So that's not true. Why did this settlement take place now? That's interesting. We have worked with the SEC for years to come to this settlement. We have reached resolution and chose not to prolong the matter. In other words, they're saying we could have fought this.
Oh yeah.
We could have fought this. We could have won, but we benevolently decided just to kind of.
We moved on. You should too.
Finally, will this settlement impact Ensign Peak's ability to continue to make investments? The answer, no. With the announcement of the order, the matter is closed.
That's true.
It's basically saying business as usual.
Yeah. Except for now, you all know we didn't want to tell you, but David told you. And in a way, I think if you asked Ensign Peak's people, I'll bet you if you could get them to be honest about it, they would say David Nielsen did them a big favor, because this was frustrating and awkward and difficult for them for many years. And so finally, it took someone with the bravery and the honesty of David Nielsen to get the word out. And now, yeah, there's fallout, and yeah, people maybe are stop paying tithing, but David did them a big favor. They should thank him, because now it's enabled them not to have to operate illegally anymore.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And I just want to make a big shout out to this new thing called the Widow's Mite Report. Have you heard of that?
No.
So there's a secret undisclosed committee of people who care about accounting and finances and who have published this really excellent report about all of these matters in the church's finances. They even go into how, like, the breakdown of the church's stock investments and their portfolios and et cetera. We're going to be doing a Mormon Stories episode on the Widow's Mite Report. And I just want to give a shout out to it, not only to let people know we're going to be talking more about this in an episode in the weeks ahead.
Is that the URL?
I will quickly Google the URL so that we can include it in the show notes. But I just want to give a shout out to the Widow's Mite people and give everyone a heads up that that's coming. Okay. So now we've responded to the church's PR piece. Now, did you tell us how that violates the spirit of the order and the end of the resolution? Well, did we already cover that?
I mean, it just seems to me that by contradicting the order, in particular, when they say that, you know, we relied on legal counsel when it approved the use. First of all, that doesn't seem to be true. And Ensign Peak handled the mechanics of the filing process. That may be true, but really kind of misses the point. The church leadership never prepared. To me, I mean, I don't know. I think this was very carefully lawyered to get this language to be, you know, not violating. But I do feel like this is pushing back on things that shouldn't be pushed back on. They should be honest with the members and say, yeah, we messed up. And that's what I would like to see. But of course, don't hold your breath.
Yeah. Okay. I just included a link to the Widow's Mite Report in the comments of the live stream. They'll also be in the show notes. Ryan Bunker, thank you for the super chat. He wrote, just found your channel, love your content, keep up the great work. Thanks to everyone who's donated today or who will donate today. Please also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Those subscriptions make a huge difference. Okay. So we've kind of reached the end of the outline that we put together. I do want to ask, what of David Nielsen? Like what do we have to look forward to in the future that we can talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to tell David's story. He's a friend.
No. Whatever's allowed to be talked about.
What is okay? So I can tell you generally in the process, you know, that David will receive, I assume, some money as a result of this settlement, much to the chagrin of the church. I'm sure it drives him crazy that he's going to get a good payment from this. It will be significant, and I'm happy for him that he gets that from the whistleblower award.
So maybe a couple million. After
No,
legal fees and everything?
lower than that. But if he gets you can do the math. If he gets a 30% award, which is the highest, 30% of 5 million is
1.5.
1.5. And so his lawyer will take a piece of that. He'll get around $1 million.
And half will be taxed.
Yeah. Then he'll have like 20 cents by the end of the day. But yeah, it'll be taxed. Yeah.
Do you know if whistleblower awards are taxable?
Yes.
They are.
Yes.
So he'll have this huge windfall all at once, which means he'll be in the highest tax bracket. 40% are going to go to the IRS.
Yeah.
But then we have to think about the fact that he had to quit his job to do this. Yeah. And I guess we don't want to talk about whether he's employed or not, or, that'd all be speculation, but it has to, and how much time and energy and anguish has he and his family endured as a result of this, of being named publicly,
being outed publicly, which most of my clients are never known to the public on who they are.
Certainly he would have lost friends and relationships. Yes. And this would have, I'm guessing this couldn't have been great for his relationship with Lars, his brother.
And his family.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think it's brutal. And I hope that he gets an opportunity to tell his story.
Yeah.
This will be some financial support for him. But to be honest, I've said this before and I'll say it again, John, my opinion is David was never motivated by money to do this. He wanted to do the right thing. He lost his testimony while he was working at Ensign Peak. That's a hell of a thing to be a church employee. You've had people on that are they have lost their testimonies while they're employees.
BYU professors.
Yeah, it's tough. And he worked there, and he'll tell the story of why he left and the conversations he had with his boss. Because I don't think he wanted to leave. I think he would have preferred to stay, but they didn't. They made the decision for him, and it's a tough story. Yeah. But again, David lost his testimony in part because of the illegality of what was happening at the company at Ensign Peak. He saw what was happening. He saw how massive the failures were, the compliance problems. They're failing to file all these different laws, IRS laws, SEC laws, and other things. And he just was offended by it.
Yeah.
That's what drives him, is he wants to do the right thing. Yeah. I wish the church had an ounce of the integrity that David Nilsson has.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this saying, you never want to see how the sausage gets made. And when you go to Capitol Hill, I saw how the sausage gets made in terms of legislation. It's not Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith goes to Washington level stuff. It's, or maybe it is, because that's all about corruption. Yeah. But yeah, so many people when they go to work for church headquarters lose their testimony. Yeah. Only a fraction of them are actually, have the luxury of leaving their employment, because for many people, they're going to be screwed, because how employable will they be?
Yes,
right.
Absolutely. And what about the flunkies that had to manage these fake LLCs that the church kind of threw under the bus, saying, those guys, it wasn't the church leadership that did this. It was these Ensign Peak people that filed those reports and these people that signed those reports. I mean, this is infuriating. Those poor people are church employees who are trying to do the right thing, who are trying to, they think they're working for God's own investment manager, I guess. Does God have an investment manager? And that's what they thought they were doing. They thought they were doing God's work and failing these fake reports. And what does the church do is it points the finger at those guys, the ones that filed the report. So it's infuriating. I feel for those guys.
I'd love to have Dave Nielsen on Mormon Stories. Hopefully he can do that someday. Any of those dudes who were signing those fake reports,
who resigned in protest when they found out.
I'll show up at 2 a.m. to interview on Mormon Stories. All right. So David will get a reward.
Yes.
Hope it would be great if the whistleblowers will get something, but we don't know.
Hard to know.
And then there's still the IRS stuff that hasn't been ruled upon yet. Mm-hmm. That could be more of a windfall for David or others.
Yes. And I wouldn't call it a windfall. I mean, if you look at this report that he wrote and you look at the amount of detail that he and his lawyers put in, I can tell you that it takes months to write something as detailed as they did, months and months and months. So he has put in a huge amount of effort here to try to document and bring forward what actually happened. And it's a thankless task to be a whistleblower. If anyone thinks that whistleblower is just free money, I have give me a call sometime and I'll explain how difficult the process is. It's brutal on your family. It's brutal on you, your mind, people go into depression, people go into bankruptcy, waiting for some award that may or may not ever come. It's a very, very difficult process. And it's hard. And I represent them. That's all I do.
Yeah. And, I know some dudes who manage hedge funds around the Wasatch Front. If David had simply just not been a whistleblower, left and used the fact that he worked for Ensign Peak and used the fact that he used to work for the church, like some people do, to then get really wealthy people to invest in his new hedge fund instead of become a whistleblower, he could have made a lot more than, 40% of 1.5.
Yeah, the public, if his confidentiality had been maintained, not only would those hedge fund people not know, but the church itself wouldn't know. The church, they might suspect, but the church is not supposed to know who the whistleblower is. The companies, when you're a whistleblower, you're supposed to be confidential, and the company doesn't know. They usually try to figure it out, but.
So really quick, thanks to Cameron Terry for the super chat. Thanks to everyone who's donating. Please subscribe on YouTube. Really quickly, is there anything we want to say about Lars Jensen, David Nielsen's brother, or do we want to avoid that conversation?
I don't want to talk about him. I mean, he had his 15 minutes. It's over.
Okay.
And I just,
because my understanding, and I obviously have a story about David and Lars. Maybe I'll save that for David's episode if he ever comes on.
Yeah.
But my sense was Lars wanted some of that, whistleblower money. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah. Well, who knows?
Okay.
And I always want to say that the team representing David Nelson includes a former regional director of the SEC, Walter Jospin, more than one federal criminal prosecutor, former IRS criminal investigative agents, another former IRS official, and an international tax lawyer, all with decades of experience. So this is the team that's filed this report is very experienced, all mostly former regulatory staff who know what they're doing, and they are working very hard to get that IRS case, which could be huge, across the finish line. But I can tell you from my Washakie case that IRS cases take a long time. They're very slow. And the average, just to give you some idea, the average, according to the IRS whistleblower office right now, the average time from filing to collection of an award is 11 years. So you think about that. It's a long, slow process.
Yeah.
It's brutal. And then that needs to change, by the way. I don't endorse that at all. That's a preposterous delay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else we need to say about the church and this issue and the future of the church's finances and other whistleblower claims, indictments for criminal indictments, anything else?
Yeah, I won't make any predictions, but I'm happy to come back on and chat anytime. And let me just say that if there are people that are listening, I'll put in my plug that if there are people listening today that invested in some sort of investment scheme through someone in their ward, or their parents got involved in something that claims, returns of 30, 40, 50%, give me a call, because you're in a Ponzi scheme, and those kind of deals just are not, they're too good to be true. And we'll help you bring that to light and hopefully recover some of your money, because that's happens all over Utah right now. And I don't care if it doesn't have to be securities. It can be crypto. It can be gold, trading gold or silver. There's a case, Rust Rare Coin, one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in Utah history, involving silver trading. If you're in something that sounds odd and you're not, and it doesn't seem like it's normal, give me a call. Let's chat about it. And if necessary, we'll stop it, because every day these Ponzi schemes in Utah has 3 times the national average in Ponzi schemes, 3 times higher per capita than any other state. And these things are victimizing our parents and our uncles and aunts and our siblings and our kids, and they need to be shut down. And that's what I do. And I have a really fun job. I get to help people bring this stuff and shut it down before more people lose money. And it's happening all the time.
So I lost money in Celsius.
There you go.
Can you help with that?
Well, that's a big one. So did everyone else.
All right.
Stay out of crypto. That's my advice.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. So I just shared a link to Mark's law firm.
Oh, thanks.
We are happy to support. We are happy to support people who are doing good in the world. It's Pugsley, Pugsley Wood, PugsleyWood.com. And, please reach out to Mark if you need help with MLM that you've been sucked into.
Yeah, MLMs are hard because they're legal. That's the problem. But anyway,
Ponzi schemes,
things where the returns that you're getting are ridiculous, and there's no apparent business underneath. That's what a Ponzi scheme is. That's our other podcast we did a while ago.
Okay. All right. And I just want to thank everyone who commented today, everyone who shared their comments, and of course, everyone who donated through Super Chats. Please, everyone. What about John Huntsman's? So I texted John Huntsman. James Huntsman. I texted James just a day or two ago. It sounds like the appeal is going to have a ruling within the next month or two.
Yeah, I've heard any day now. So that could be interesting. That's another fraud case against the church.
Essentially,
the church. He's asking for the church to give him his tithing money back. I don't know much about it. I've read it. I think it would be fantastic if he won. I'll just say that.
Yeah. And then there's the Boy Scouts, sexual abuse stuff.
The sexual abuse stuff is the scandal that hasn't happened in the church. I mean, it's roiled the Catholic Church, parish after, or whatever the districts, I forget what they're called. I mean, parishes are there. I mean, it's just like one after another. And my personal view is that the amount of sexual abuse that occurs in the LDS church is as significant as any other church. We have a tremendous amount of sexual dysfunction in the church because, as you know, as a therapist, sexual repression inevitably leads to sexual dysfunction, and it's going on all over the place. And what the church does is when they hear about them, they settle, they shut them down before they even get filed. And then they have them pay them a bunch of money right out of those same funds, tithing funds. And they put them under confidentiality agreements, so that is just it's all under the table right now. And I think eventually that's all going to come out.
Okay,
I hope so.
So much scandal.
Yeah. Why don't we do background checks on people? How about that?
Yeah.
How hard would that be?
Yeah. It's a miracle that religions survive these days, but they still do. They're resilient.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
they're on the ropes.
Anecdotally, the number of people that didn't go back to church after COVID is massive.
But the thing is the church doesn't need them anymore.
No,
just like Scientology, the church is richer than Heavenly Father at this point, and it's going to be doubling its money every what?
Well, I don't know the number, but they're saving it for some rainy day, and I just am waiting to see what exactly is.
We'll be talking about this in the Widow's Mite report, but like within 40 to 50 years, the church will be $1 trillion organization.
Oh yeah, easy.
Without any members.
No,
without anyone donating $1 more tithing.
Not a penny.
Yeah.
No, they don't need it.
Yeah. And so the church doesn't need members. Not only does the church not need tithing, it doesn't need members.
Except to clean the toilets. Apparently they need members for that.
And to be missionaries. Service senior missionaries and young missionaries.
John, missions are not for converting other people. They're for converting the missionary.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, so that's a weird, there's someone, somebody says this is just too much money for anyone to have.
Yeah.
I mean, just sort of taking out our criticism and our, I know we're wrapping up, but you're Russell M. Nelson, you're John H. Oakes, you're sitting on, I mean, we'll talk about this in the Widow's Mite report, but you're sitting on couple $100 billion. One
of the largest portfolios on earth.
Yeah. And we'll cover that in the Widow's Mite report. What do you do with the money? You don't just hand it out on the street. It's hard. It turns out it's really hard to do good. There's this, of dropping, food supplies with parachutes into Africa. Warlords will take it and sell it and then buy guns. It
is hard.
It's not easy.
But who does a good job is the Gates Foundation. There are other foundations out there that are very good at doing that. The UN, the Red Cross, the Red Crescent. There are organizations that can take this money and would do anything. There's LDS organizations. There's one, what's the one that helps kids in in South America,
Leahona Foundation,
You know, they're run by good church members who could really use the money. I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Globus Relief. They send medical supplies throughout the world. They could use the money. You know, the church could be much more generous in donating. But again, what would Jesus do with $100 billion, John?
Yeah.
You know, what would he do?
Or two.
He wouldn't sit on it.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
Yeah. Okay. This has been amazing, Mark. Really quickly, are there any episodes you and I still need to do? Like the Nicola story is fascinating. Do you want to tell that? Or
I tell it if you want.
Okay.
I mean, it's a fun story, but
it's a Mormon story.
It's a Mormon story. And the thing that I think that I didn't really get into in our last podcast, because my thinking has evolved a lot on it, is the question I get asked the most is, why is fraud so much more prevalent within the Mormon context? Everyone asks me that constantly. Why? And I have developed some new theories about it, because based on my interviews with people who are victims of these frauds and what they tell me. Yeah. And I think we could talk a little bit about that, because I think there's a really perverse psychology in the church about trust. It's not naivete. People in the church are well educated. They have MBAs. It's not about being stupid. It's that they somehow let down their guard when it's another church member, and when they think that the money's going to be used for good in some way. And it's extremely dangerous. And your parents and my parents and everyone listening, their parents are all going to be vulnerable to that guy in their ward who seems like the best guy, but has this thing that they really need to know about. And wouldn't this be great if you could earn all this money to support your children on missions? That pitch happens all the time. And then the money's gone.
So that means more Mark Pugsley on Mormon Stories.
Well, I don't know, John. I'm happy to talk. If people Google my name, they'll see that I talk a lot. So I've done lots of interviews. I've done lots of things, but it's fun. And I'm very lucky. Let me just say this. As a lawyer, I spent a lot of years defending bad guys, and it drove me nuts. I couldn't do it. And so I switched, and I began representing plaintiffs in certain types of broker-dealer cases, and then doing whistleblower work. And I have to say, I feel like I'm doing God's work. You know, I really do. I'm very lucky.
I relate.
It's kind of fun.
I relate, Mark Pugsley.
Yeah. You too. Yeah, exactly.
That's beautiful. Okay. And if we're going to leave people with what they can do, call those Senate numbers that are in the description.
Yeah. And encourage them to do something and get on, tell the IRS to get on it.
So call your senators, call the Senate Finance Committee. Mm-hmm. Write your senator. Yeah. That's something immediate you can do. Share this episode with as many people as possible. And if you have family members that think that the church didn't do anything wrong, send them that SEC order, let them read it for themselves, because that's an order the church agreed to and admitted that the first presidency did it all. I mean, that is so important, and it really has been missed by all the press. So there needs to be a letter from an SEC settlement. Yeah, well, I just think if you just read it, it's pretty obvious in there that this was all directed by the first presidency. I mean, that's got to be destabilizing to people's testimonies. Hopefully, I think. I mean, not hopefully, but like, huh? Wait, you had a choice and you chose what? It's certainly something people should care about. All right, Mark, you're awesome. You're a treasure. Thanks, John. Thanks for coming on Mormon Stories. Thanks for having me. It's fun to do. Yeah. All right. And just thanks to everyone who's joined us today. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for following us on YouTube. We're at 120,000+ subscribers on YouTube after only being at 100 like a month ago. Somehow our growth rate has increased the larger we've gotten, which is really crazy, but we're grateful. Please continue that by subscribing. The core of what we do at the Open Stories Foundation relies on your monthly donations. So if you value this content, if you want to see it continue, please go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. It's tax deductible in the US. We're transparent in our finances. We do file an annual 990, unlike the church and Ensign Peak Advisors. And literally we try and spend every possible dollar we can on the mission of the Open Stories Foundation, which is informed consent for Mormons and the rest of the world, helping people through faith transitions and help people build beautiful, big lives if they need to outside the LDS Church. So please support us if you can. We lose donations every month because of haters, because people get bored or lose interest or fall on financial hard times. So if we don't have you stepping up to replace the monthly donors we lose, then we have to start cutting services or eventually shut down. So please support us if you can. Love to David Nielsen and his family. All to the other two secret whistleblowers out there. Love to you as well. Love to the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Paul Feint, who investigated this bravely, a Utah guy.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, did we talk about that?
I don't know if he's LDS, but he is in Utah. He's in Salt Lake City. Paul Feint is the SEC lawyer who did this case.
He's a Utah guy.
Brave guy.
Shout out to that guy.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
If he's listening, shout out to Paul. He's a good guy.
Yeah. And let's just all be good to each other. Let's be kind to each other. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody.